And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast.
What are you doing?
I have no idea.
I need to know what that is, because otherwise
I don't know.
I have no place to go from here.
I
I have nothing to work off of.
I was going as deep as
He's
possible.
doing Vincent twice.
Is that like a play off Vincent Price?
Yes.
Is that the
Muppets.
Oh
Muppets.
yeah,
He would always
saw that.
repeat it too.
right.
It was always
That's like Jimmy Two Times from what was it?
Was he
Godfather?
like the
I'm
Count's
gonna go get
like
the papers.
buddy?
Get the papers.
no. He was the dude doing the Vincent Price introduction to like some sort of epic, scary moral story.
Right.
Except it was Sesame Street, so it really wasn't like epic or scary. It just had morals.
Right.
Since
You
we're all
actually said it,
talking now,
We're on three different things again.
I want to
They're
start.
nice.
I want to start the episode by introducing our guest this week. Hops is joining us.
Hello. It's so good to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
If we were just hearing your voice, he could have just like sidled in there and not introduced himself. He could have gotten away with that.
He could have.
You know.
I first met Hops when he opened for Shape of the Dark Lord a few months back, and loved his stuff. And since then, I fell in love with more of his work that I found online. And so I asked him to join us on the podcast. And he's actually the one who brought us our album this week. Before we get into the album, though, I do want to mention, as I always do, the Wasties are playing this coming week on the 21st at the Way Station. Come out if you're a New York local. Come see them band. They're a lot of fun. There's always lots of drinking and Irish-ish songs.
Irish. It's already there.
And
The
Celt-ish.
suffix was present. You did not have to add another suffix.
Irish-ish.
Wasted
They're already
away.
Irish. They're ire. A little bit of ire.
A little bit of iron, a lot of ish.
The actual you would actually phrase it as Irish like.
Why?
Because Irish-ish just sounds so bad.
I have a friend whose father, I am not Jewish, I am a Jew. There's nothing ishy about me being a Jew.
I like
That's
that.
great.
I like that.
That means
Perfect.
every culture. I mean, a lot of cultures are already just kind of ish.
Yeah, no, it's...
I'm very Anglo-ish, you know.
See, and that's not interestingly enough. There's no English. English.
Well, it's English.
Oh, I just stumbled upon a gold mine here.
Yeah, of course.
Use it.
totally.
I'm very
So-
Engle. There's nothing ish about me.
Yeah.
You can cut that. You can
Yeah.
cut that
No,
out.
oh,
No,
yeah.
we can keep that most
Yeah, we'll
definitely.
totally edit that out
For
later. No, we won't.
posterity,
No, we
we're
won't
keeping
edit
that.
anything out. Why don't we jump into our album this week? Hops had brought it to us, so why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
The album is Vapor City by Machinedrum. And,
One word.
One word. And Machinedrum is an electronic musician from North Carolina.
Huh.
And I think he actually lives in Berlin now. I think he lived in Brooklyn for a while, and he did a bunch of shows in Brooklyn. And he's released a ton of stuff. I think he put his first record out when he was like 19. And I think he's like 30 now. So you go on his Wikipedia page, and there's tons of stuff. He's done a lot of remixes. He's got a ton of singles.
Definitely taken some steps up in the world. I mean, going from North Carolina to Brooklyn is probably a bigger step than going from Brooklyn to Berlin. In my mind. So.
Exactly.
Well, it's Brooklyn. It's Brooklyn.
Exactly. It speaks for itself. Anybody knows.
Very thick accent.
And I think he actually got his start in like country and like folk, which is really interesting, especially when you listen to his music.
I was about to say we didn't have it. We have never had anybody from North Carolina, except perhaps the Carolina Chocolate Drops. It's in their name.
That's
I
Right?
think
They're all
I think
about
they're-
the folk and the Americana.
Yeah.
But it's more Appalachian than anything else. I mean, we're going to shoehorn them.
I'm gonna be fair about this.
Seriously, guys, of all the semantics, this? Of all the things?
Blame him.
Yeah.
I'll continue.
Would you like to know where swinging a cat comes from?
No. Continue.
I would.
Well, no, I was just gonna say I've heard of his massive amount of stuff. I've only heard 4 of his records. 1212, spelled 1212. He's
Clever.
very obsessed with the 1-2 thing.
You'll see it later.
You'll see it later. which was a really, really long album with, like, tons of different styles, and it didn't really come together for me, but there's lots of good songs on it, and it's very, like, everything he does is good. There's a lot of craftsmanship to it, but it's not always easy to listen to, which I think is something very interesting about him.
I suppose you could say, just to interrupt, there's a little bit of, I understand what you're saying, that it's not always easy to listen to. For instance, some of the ambient albums that we've had here, like, for instance, when we were talking about Boards of Canada and their album earlier, Tomorrow's Harvest, and how all of us were saying, even though a lot of us on this side of the room, we kind of liked that album, it was work. It really was work. Because there's a bore factor to it, a very, very heavy bore factor that goes with ambient, and even a lot of chill wave, and basically anything that falls under the whole drone genre.
Right.
It kind of takes a little bit more of a conscious, active listen if you're really, really going to be pulled into that world.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and what's interesting about this album, and I won't get into details right just yet, but it is not drastically different from his other stuff, but it's concise and it's more cohesive than his other stuff, because usually he dabbles in, he'll go from house to jungle to hip-hop to almost even pop. And this is a very, like, it's heavy with bass and beat, but it has a lot of ambient sort of sounds to it.
Well, I'll cite what I observed for the moment. Take just some of the music here. A lot of it, I think, is borrowed a little bit from R&B, the kind you'd find like in the sound bites and the backdrop of that genre, which otherwise would provide just a singular mood or backdrop for that. And it only is because it's backseat to the vocalist. And it takes those sound bites and it takes it sort of the next logical step and makes more complex work out of that alone. Whereas otherwise it would just get looped and looped and looped. And I'm not saying there's no looping going on in this album here, but it takes it the next step. It does much more with those sound bites than would ever be done otherwise.
Right.
Normally it's just cut, paste, repeat. And this takes it much farther than that.
Yeah, he's very good about automation and phasing and making sure that every time you hear those vocal samples that he's doing something new with them to make them sound more interesting the further along the song goes. So
just to throw out some names here for anyone interested in some stuff on these lines, I would compare them to bands like Prefuse 73 and Thievery Corporation, which in fact a lot of the work that Thievery Corporation does is not always their own. It's either compilations of existing work and then they throw it in together as kind of a weird remix hash. Same with Prefuse 73.
Yeah.
So lots of work with sound bites. Who wants to begin?
Why don't you take us into the first track, Hops?
Okay, the first track is called Gunshotter.
Yes.
One word.
Yeah.
Gunshotter.
In fact, most of these words are meshed together in one word.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
It's his thing. Let him do it.
But no, I like this song. I think it's a great way to start the album. I love the go ahead.
The building on top of the deep drops.
Yeah.
The deep drop out of the bass work with that high-speed beat work really sets a great precedent for what he does with the rest of the album. It really is showcasing the bass very well. The bass levels, the deep chords, and the kind of muffled sound that is perpetuated throughout this album. And I like that sort of underground, underwater type of a feel that he's working here.
It bookends the track. It starts off sort of as it's underwater, and then it rises up, and everything becomes a lot clearer and crisper, and then at the end it just sort of fades away into the night.
And
kind of sweet.
That also goes back to what you were speaking of. It showcases the phasing. It showcases the evolution he puts into his tracks. And this is a great, just for that alone, a great introduction to this album.
It's also sort of a burgeoning into existence kind of feel. It's like when something is so muffled in the beginning and you start off with that electronica feel, it's like it just, there it is, a snapshot in time. And then as soon as it comes, it goes away.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a theme I noticed throughout several of these tracks. But on the whole, I would say that as an intro, this was really no exception to the rule of, playing with sound bites, having them repeat. But I will say, I will agree with you, John, I was very surprised about the beat work. It was a lot more complex than what you get on, let's say, even just general techno stuff. A lot of times techno can be very predictable in what it delivers, and this, I think, perhaps for his namesake, Machinedrum, Drum Machine, has something. I think that's really where his primary talent lies.
Yeah. And this is where it's actually going to start. This is where his stuff diverges from what you would consider house or techno, in that it's not the speed of dancing.
Right.
It's the speed of cruising. And that's an important distinction between this and other artists. This is, to its namesake, Chillwave. It's something that you relax to. You're not getting hyped up to.
Yeah.
Even with the way this song itself sort of brings those deeper, muffled noises and brings them out into the forefront, coupled with the splicing of the vocals, which was done excellently. It's not fast enough to bounce to, and it's not slow enough to really lull you. It promotes movement, but slow movement.
I recall you saying almost the same exact thing for Deep Chord. And their album Somer at the time. You did. No, you did. You really did say that same exact thing. That it's sort of in that nice middle ground. Which I will say this: that is it's a nice place to be mood wise. You really not everyone listens to music because they want to fall asleep, unless you're actually whipping out the stuff that's tailor made to make you fall asleep. Like, I have narcolepsy. I need to fall asleep right now. So you get that stuff. But other people might find bands that it just helps. But usually you want to be placed into a mood actively, normally.
Well, this song, as far as intro tracks go, does a good job of engaging you. I don't think it's definitely not the best thing on the record, but it's engaging enough for an intro track that you want to hear more. You want to know where it's going to go, especially with the works that they're displaying between the vocals, blending well with the beats, interesting beat work, and so on.
I go back and forth on it, because yes, there are some things about this that are a little bit predictable, which could have led me to believe I was going to get a different album than what I got. For instance, some of the loops, I mean, it could have gone the direction of Somer by Deep Chord. It very well could have, based on this first track. But I will say the beat work, I think, is what really separated. That's where you get the complexity that kind of separates it from the pack. Very elongated loops that are changing, alternating, lots of triplets, hemiolas, almost sporadic at moments. Like some guy just sort of starts slapping you in the face. It's kind of that crazy, the beat work and the drum machine in the background. Not always predictable. It goes through predictable segments, but then it just phases out, and you're not really sure where it's going to go. That was the most alluring thing to me about the intro.
I really love, I think it's around, I want to say like 2:15, about 2 minutes into it, there's this percussion sound, and it's kind of like a mallet. It's like a high-pitched mallet sound. And it literally takes it from this song that so far is very, I think, hip-hop inspired, especially with the title Gunshata, which is also very like reggae inspired. But it takes it from this like slow, like, what are we getting ourselves into this sort of, okay, it's time for business, and welcome to the album, here we go. I wish I could describe the sound better. You'll have to go and listen to it.
I believe that was the same point where they actually dropped out most of the actual layering.
It is.
And brought in just the vocal pitch changing, coupled with that really muffled big bass drum.
I'm trying to think. Yes, there is the bass drum gets really big. You've got the high-pitched percussion instrument. I'm not sure if there's any vocals there. I think that's what was sort of interesting about it, is the vocals actually like dropped out of the picture for the first time in the entire song, because Gunshata is repeated for the first like 2 minutes of the song. Yeah. And then they take it away, and the song almost becomes something completely different. I mean, the beat stays the same, but there's just more layers over it, and so it feels it's the same song, but it feels a little different.
Well, see, when the vocals are there and certain other things start growing in complexity, it makes me sort of forget the moments in which the briefer, more defined drum loops are staying kind of regular. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be, and that's what I kind of saved the track for me, is that it seems to be very, very very organized. Mm-hmm. For instance, when there's stuff going on, well, the drums take a back seat, and then when the stuff pulls out, then the drums start. That is the forefront. So that's what I thought was kind of cool about the trade-off here. A lot of times, it would a track like this would very easily just recede everything, and then you're left with almost a minute, 2 minutes of just the same thing repeating over and over again. At which point, you gotta wonder where it's headed. This wasn't that case, though.
I think that speaks to the control of the reverb of the instruments.
There was heavy verb throughout this track. There's the album as a whole.
It's the control of it, because it's not present throughout the entire, even segment of the instrument. The drum work, the bass work will stay very similar throughout the whole song. And it's not just the altering of the volumes, but the altering of how much distortion is being created by the instruments that really does a great job of keeping it fresh.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's a song later in the track when we get to it that is all that, mostly. This warping and twisting with the reverb and volume.
Yeah. There's definitely, I will say one more thing about this, and that was just the soundbite, apart from getting shot at, but the soundbite that was repeated so many times, and I don't mean it was repeated so many times, although it was, I mean that was what they were actually saying so many times. Almost like it's a bit mulling. Like, there's a lot of mulling going on within the track, like you're stuck in someone's mind a little bit.
Yeah.
And, that theme, I think, returns a little bit later, although not immediately.
Yeah, there are definitely some themes later in the record for sure that suggest turning inward and introspective.
Exactly.
Shall we hit to track 2?
Oh, we may.
Why don't you take us into it, Steve?
Infinite Us. Well, I'm going to put it out there generally here. I love this track, at least because it lives up to its name, Chillwave, because it gave me chills. Which maybe is not what they were intending, but what the hell. Either case, just the intro itself. Piano intro, but not just any basic piano intro. It begins with chords that sort of center around the upper partials. Mostly a finite series of 11th chords, which I'm always a sucker for anyway. But what's more fascinating here is that they're only block chords, which, just from a basic piano 101 standpoint, is the most simple form of any chord that you can possibly do. You just stack up the notes as they appear. 1, 3, 5... 7, 9, 11, etc. No inversions, no fancy jazz voicings where you clump up certain notes and make them denser in one area than others. It is just very even. Place your hands evenly in the keyboard, and there they are. And that makes it all sound very raw, very fundamental. It goes through these even chords, and it establishes its loop, and that repeats throughout the rest of the track as other instruments join in and make it more complex. But the raw block chord does not change.
Well, what I think... I think there's a sign of this in a lot of the record, but it really stems out in Infinite Us, is starting with a basic format like that makes it so much more approachable, and then they bring in so much more later. There's nothing simple about its construction, but the pieces are simple, and they're putting simple pieces together to make something more beautiful and complex.
Right.
This is a showcase in the expansive nature that Machinedrum can do. The first thing they bring into this piano work is that really, really heavy, almost guttural beat.
Oh, yeah.
And that starts, and that completely changes the piano work.
Well, actually...
And then it goes into the more snare drummy style. And that completely reinvents it. And it's amazing.
There's a series of progression here. I'll outline that. The first beat that joins the chords, I actually found very crisp. But this time more even, more persistently looped, which is not a bad thing. It works really, really well in this instance because of the whole eyebrow-raising nature of the block chords themselves. And then on top of that, he adds this drumstick sort of clapping together, and that punctuates the existing rhythm, just before, just after certain notes, which kind of keeps you on your toes, so it makes everything a little bit more interesting. And then the synth bass drops in. I think that's what you were describing, John. That bass is really, really guttural, and it follows along with each and every chord, which gives those otherwise basic chords so much more breadth, so much more depth, and from there it just builds and builds and builds. Colors the chords with piano, guitar, reverb, echo, synth strings, ambient synth, you name it. It is literally tailor-made to send chills down your spine, I think.
It's dissonant without actually losing its cohesion.
You know, dissonant is a strange word to use for it because of how evenly spaced those notes are. Dissonance was not something that entered into to me.
For me, it was the competition between the various instruments or replications of instruments that he was using that really created the dissonance. Because you can hear the steady beat. You hear the same thing throughout
Yes.
95% of the
That's
song. Yet every single segment, every single introduction creates a new reinvention. And they are so unlike one another. There is a real progression throughout the various emotional ideas he's presenting here.
It at least gives that illusion, because after all, this track is 7 minutes long, and it does not feel its length.
I was
not to
gonna,
me.
No, I was going to bring that up. Infinite Us, the namesake really applies because it feels like this song probably could have gone on in this way endlessly, and it would have been engaging because of the way it kept inventing itself and altering itself. It really does pull you in to the point that you don't realize how long the song is actually going on.
Yeah.
And it does have something towards the end, and that is that collapse of all the instrumentation.
The roll-off of this track, it's so gentle. After that climax, it just, again, recedes into the night, kind of like the previous track.
Yeah, that's actually the only part of this song that I like.
Bizarre. Well, see, his silence makes sense.
I love the piano intro. The vocal samples are great. You know, there's most of the vocal samples on this record I love, and I usually hate vocal samples in electronic music. I can't stand it. Usually
I'm
gets in the
kind of
way.
with you there.
I'm definitely that way.
Yeah, but they're all pretty lovely on this album. Now there's a sound, and I think I'm not sure if it's like arpeggiated synth or if it's like a rhythmic, but it occurs through almost the entire song, and it does pitch shifts throughout
It's a
this
downward
song.
arpeggiation of those same chords I described,
Right.
and it does. It's not the entire song though, because in the beginning you just get the singular block chords, and it's about halfway through where that's one of those layers we were discussing. It starts that downward spiral, and it's just that repetition of do 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 do. It almost could be called a melody at that point, at least, or the closest thing this track could possibly have to a melody.
Yeah,
but it's really more of an added figuration on top of the existing work. I thought it was beautiful, though.
See, but there's another set of sounds that's sharper. I know what you're talking about, but there's like a sharper sound that goes we
try to refrain from singing.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. But it does pitch shifting throughout the entire song, and there's something really like uncomfortable and unpleasing to the ear about it that I sort of lose everything else in the song. It really, really bothers me.
Yeah,
but
that's fair. The dissonance that you describe might come from just those 11th chords itself. I mean, they're very common jazzy chords. So a lot of people use 9th chords, 11th chords, 13th chords are so dense. I mean, you're talking about 7 notes in one single chord. It's a little bit much for the human ear to really accept, and at time I could easily see how a wrong usage of that chord could really just send you off. And I have a feeling that might be what your issue here is. Not positive, but just a theory.
It might be. It's one of those things where, and there's a song later that does a similar thing. When we get to it, I'll talk about it there. But it's one of these things where it's like producing a sound for the sake of producing a sound, whether it's pleasant or not. Right. And in this case, it's just absolutely not pleasant. So
I'm going to have to disagree with you there. Totally. We can duke this out if you want. Yeah. I'm ready.
I'll see you in the parking lot.
But you did like the outro.
I did like the outro.
Which is where he started from this.
I did like the outro.
That sounds interesting.
Spacey.
Because when those instruments do drop, and even the beat drops, and I actually have no problem with the beat in the song. The percussion's all very good. But when all that stuff drops, it's quite lovely to the end. But it's before that
it's so bizarre, because that fall for me would mean absolutely nothing without the build-up that they had previously.
Yeah, sure.
It's all context to me. Like, if you had done just... Granted, that probably is one of the most pleasing singular moments of the track, but the rest of it I was just sort of enthralled front to back by the next thing that they introduced. But it wasn't just layering for the sake of layering to me. It was more of a... It's more of the combined aspect of every single instrument.
Sure.
Sort of... It's a perfect blend of, like, the ethereal and the ineffable. And that's kind of what... Certain moments on this album, it broaches that, and other times it's kind of straightforward and on the nose. But I'm even going to go off the title here, Infinite Us. It actually brought to mind the complexity and vastness of the cosmos. That's where I was at with this track.
Especially with the outro. Especially with the outro.
Yeah.
Cold, not without emotion. Definitely felt that in the outro. All that wonderful crap.
You know what I think it is, too? Is that, like... It's one of those sounds where I think people can disagree on how that actual sound sounds to them. You know,
because
it's not like
written-
a guitar or a piano, which is it's easy to identify those sounds,
Yeah.
you know. But this sound is something that you either like it or you don't. And I think that personally, I hated it so much that it was so difficult for me to actually get involved with the rest of what was going on in the song. So that when that sound actually stops, it's almost like a relief to the ear.
We've had this discussion before, and I actually have brought it up a bunch of times. I love bright little chimes. You know,
I
those
love
high
bright
little
chimes. I love bright chimes.
I hate when, in my opinion, they're being misused.
Right.
And I've had this sort of thing, so I understand
I
exactly.
hate when people take my chimes and defile
If you're
them.
going to use a chime, you better use it right.
Yes, no, we've actually.
I'm
I've
so glad
said
you've
that
got a hold
before.
on the chime business here.
But
Just a strong
I
hold.
understand exactly what you're getting at.
Yeah.
For me, it was. I'm with Steve on this one, and I think Matt's with us on this one too. You can speak up.
I
He's
don't you
being
guys go have a
so
little
safe
party?
and neutral in the corner there.
No, I mean, I've said that I enjoyed this song, but it's definitely, I don't love it as much as you two do. But I can
I won't
understand.
say love. No, that's where I really enjoy its progression, but I think there's better tracks on this album. Definitely.
Well, I will say that this song is definitely and completely polarized by the following song after it. Like, that's what made me appreciate this song.
I'm gonna agree with that, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this song I appreciated more after hearing the next track, which I might as well introduce our next track, the third track. Don't to lose you. So it's don't, the number 1, the number 2, lose the letter U. So with this song, I mean on a base level, just to generally describe it, it was, for me, it was so repetitive that, like, I couldn't, like, I had the same problem Hops had in the last track. It was so repetitive, I couldn't see past that repetitive beat, this halting beat that almost stuttered. And the stutter, like, every time I wanted to get into a groove, the beat stuttered, and it kind of threw me off.
Yeah.
Well, it's that throw off there. That's the strange thing. It begins with, I want to say, more vagueness and less power, I think, than the previous track. The vagueness, now you could go either way with that, as to whether that, just gets you off in just the right way. And I think the reason for that is the clapping. It's because beyond that, there's really not that much to talk about. I mean, the chords are very, very basic. Most of it is just 1, 4, 5, 1, with a very off-putting drag on the 5 chord, which almost feels like it fell asleep and forgot to go to 1. So you're just waiting there. But more off-putting than that, really, is the rhythm, because that's just present throughout the entire track, as Matt described. I mean, it could be kind of cool through certain eyes. I see it as definitely being a bit of a polarizing thing, because it's an interesting rhythm. It's not something you hear every day. But I gotta be nitpicky about how bizarre it is, because the whole thing is likely in 4/4, or maybe a slow 2-step. After all, you get that don't 1 2 1 2, as in lose you. That's in the title, but I thought that might be a reason. In either case, it's just that rearmost clapping beat that just gets me. It's off-putting.
I looked at it this way, and I recently dug out my Fruity Loops and powered it back on. I used to do it in high school. It's been 10 years, so I really forgot everything about it. But the first 5 instruments you give you are the very simple stuff just to get your mind thinking. And this is all he really seems to use in this song to set up the main core of what's going on here.
Which is funny, because that's not the case. It's like he had so many resources, and he chose to go very minimal with it.
And it really hurts, and for that, I was upset. Yeah. Because we got so much more intricate and interesting things in the first 2 tracks that it felt almost cop-out. Well, that, and I hate clapping at this point. I'm so tired of clapping.
You are the first...
and then that's the funny thing, because actually I wasn't quite done. There's 2 things. The thing that I described before, just that 2-step, that is the clapping. That's the clapping alone, which is actually very easy to comprehend. But it's over that basic 2-step or 4/4, however you want to see it. Beyond that, more focus is placed on that short staccato beat that squeezes in about 10 notes, approximately, for that 4-beat measure, but not evenly and not always. Almost not worth dissecting, but for the first 2 minutes, it's like someone going, It's like the annoying kid in, like, elementary school. Who was me.
But I was just gonna, wow, he saw in my eyes I was going there.
I could see in your brain, man.
Well, this song just, it just doesn't, you know, I mean, this is probably the most I will ever think about this song, is right in this moment right now, because it really just doesn't do anything for me. The only part I like, the redeeming value of the song, is the synth pad that comes in about halfway. It's like a nice soft string that it's literally just layered over the same crap that we've been hearing for the first 2 minutes, but it makes the song a little bit better.
I agreed with you completely 100% on that point. Then, completely 100%. Both of those things.
Right, because one wasn't enough, so you had to say both.
Had to do it both. Yeah. So, I admit that synth, it really did fill out the remainder of the track a lot more. It made it more tolerable. It darkened up the chords, modulated to the 5, threw in some 7s. That was cool, but they definitely lost.
But when you're saying when you're saying a thing made the song tolerable, in the end, it's still not good.
I'm aware of the word that I chose, Matt. Very aware.
Wait, refuting. Not refuting.
I'm not going to listen to 2 minutes of crap so that I can get to that one. It's literally one.
Despite the fact that we live in a world of search bars and all you have to do is just jump to it. Timestamp.
But I do enjoy that choppy nature that the song set up. I like that dissonance they threw without actually changing the tempo.
Well, you're allowed to be wrong.
I enjoyed that. I like it because it is something different. It's something we're not prepared for. It's something that you're not used to. I appreciate the endeavor.
What astute choice of words. Really.
I wish it had been done with a more complex backbeat.
Well, see, that's kind of funny because really that backbeat is pretty complex. But in this case, I'm actually uncharacteristic for me. It is. I mean, it's very odd the way that halty nature. There is a pattern there. There's a pattern that I was not going to break down, but it's bizarre. But it's not a pleasant pattern.
To me, this song is just okay. Well, no, it's not even okay. It reminds.
It's just okay.
It's reminiscent of Flying Lotus and the fact that there's he's trying something. The experimentation is there to a point. Like he's trying something a little different. That's not enough.
But what Lotus did that he's not doing is Lotus made it 15 seconds long, and I don't like that. I like that he actually tried to make it something a lot more expansive. It's an attempt.
There definitely is evolution, especially considering with what Hop said about the synth that joins in. But I do want to go. I will play devil's advocate with your point, John, because you said, I mean, at least just looking at it objectively, you were interested in what he was going for. It's meant to be. It is unnerving, and I think it's supposed to be a little bit unnerving,
right?
Because I think it is the mulling of a single person again. It's back in that introverted state, which even though this may not be in the direction that I was really hoping for out of this album, it does achieve that. It does make me unnerved. It makes me unsettled. We've had that in other albums before where we feel unsettled, but it's not always a bad thing because at least you feel something. Well, in this case, I'm not really feeling anything, but if someone is, such as John, then
it's provocative.
Bully for you.
It's attempting to be.
That is provocative, actually.
That's true.
The perfect word.
Discorded and dissident and trying to make you upset. I like that.
Also, because
but
let's cite the vocal soundbite first. The vocal soundbite is "Don't want to lose you." It gets repeated over and over and over throughout there. So there's definitely mulling at play.
At this point, it's clear that the vocals are not a forefront in this record. They're meant to be an instrument, and in a good mix, they sound great. In a bad mix, they become repetitive and almost obnoxious.
But
and there are moments of both.
Saying what he's saying though does have some validity. Don't want to lose you. Hence, you're sort of trapped in the psychosis of your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in any kind of emotional state where you're traumatized, you tend to replay those traumatizing moments over and over in your head,
so
hoping they'll change.
On a purely objective artistic level, great. The track succeeds.
Yeah.
It's just not pleasant to my ear necessarily.
No. So, but then again, you know what?
I'll give you that, 'cause
scratching nails on a chalkboard achieves something, but I still don't like it.
It achieves scratching nails on a chalkboard. You've done that. Good.
But I think this is a good time to get into the next song, track 4.
Which is really pretty.
It's a really good song.
This one's really good.
This is one of my favorite tracks on the record. The track is called Center Your Love.
Oh, man.
And it's not the most 80s track on the record, but it's almost. I described it as 80s and proud. It's got a great beat, and it's a very...
It starts excellently.
Yeah.
With those drawn organ-styled chords, which I love that introduction for something that speaks to love. Organs just have their place in our society as speaking of love.
I mean, organs are usually used for that type
In
of
fact,
thing.
the heart is, well, the heart's a muscle, but, there are other organs.
You went for
it.
the one that actually does not support
No, not at all.
Does not support the joke. Damn.
And in this case, I liked one major aspect in that the organ, which you would think is a little bit tinny, but very, very much a vibrating style of sound, was really the most cohesive element in this entire song, because all the other chord work just about felt like it was coming apart, like it was oscillating, and I love the way that the reverb was used in this song. The phasing and the layering was just amazing, the way he was doing it.
There was a lot of oscillation going here, oscillation, phasing. I mean, that's kind of present throughout the album, though, so I didn't necessarily see that as like a
in this, I felt like it was a great forefront, because it gave me the illusion of trying to find that single spot, which speaks to the title name.
Well, I was back and forth with this track. I mean, it was kind of pleasing overall, and yeah, for a couple of reasons. I mean, I go back and forth with this 80s thing, 80s and proud of it. It's like, on one hand, well, great for you, bully for you, you're bringing back the 80s, everybody else does it, why can't you do it too? It seems to strike a chord with a lot of people, because as soon as you bring in those sound bites, it just, everyone seems to relate. Maybe it's because everyone grew up with some, at least every generation under 35 now has grown up with some degree of 80s music in their past. But it's not as prevalent here as it is in later tracks. The main thing I think that this track does have going for it is that it's kind of a sensual track, especially when you consider the female voice, sort of breathy, sort of halting, and the guitar on top of that gives it sort of a funk edge, which makes it a little bit sexual. And then beyond that, you have these moments of quiet where everything just kind of bleeds out, and it leaves just the beat and the breathing that adds the sensual air of the track. I think that's really this track's strong suit.
Yeah, I love this. I have a note here actually. Fake shimmering guitar is always a winner, and you can quote me on that, because I love that sound. And it's the first. I didn't even think about it being 80s until we talked about it tonight, but it's got this like really comfortable feel to it, and it's the only comfortable song on the album. Like we were talking about unnerving. Like, the rest of the album is very unnerving, but this song is actually like a nice break from that.
I'll agree with you on that, with the exception of perhaps one track later on, which I did find, ironically, more comfortable.
Oh, well, actually,
maybe comfortable is wrong.
But no, yeah, I would agree, and that adds to your sensual kind of feels theory. Yeah. It feels something. It does very much feel like something you can just kind of fall into.
Ideal one wouldn't describe a sensual aspect as simply comfortable. That's actually very.
No. I believe that true sensuality with the right partner, you always feel comfortable in the moment.
Right.
You never feel
Intimacy.
uncomfortable.
I think of comfortable as being the word for everything else. For every other time you're with them, then once sensuality begins, you grow a little bit, ideally beyond comfortable.
Well, but it starts with a comfort.
And
you have to feel
this is semantics, but I think this is important semantics.
And who said intimacy? Raise your hand. Okay, Hops, you're right. Intimacy is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
What are you, John McLaughlin? Right, correct. Going around the circle.
Well, at least I'm not saying he's wrong, right?
Right.
But intimacy is probably a great way.
Wrong. Right.
Oh God, I had to bring it up. It does have that idea of a little bit of fear. There is a little bit of fear, and I think that's because of the waning oscillation of most of the instruments, most of the beats. But it's finding that center that really does kind of solidify it for me as a great piece. And I really, really enjoyed when the snare beat, which was the only piece that wasn't getting fooled around with its reverb and everything like that, dropped out at the end, and you just had those oscillations. It really did become very sensual, very intimate in its presentation.
Well, I think most of the drum work itself, the drum machine work, was not. Reverb was not really at play there. Every single drum, that sounds very, very crisp, very clear. You don't really have that reverb or echo or anything of that kind. That's actually the one piece of stability. While everything else is stuck in ambient, ethereal territory, that is the thing that really, really anchors you to the ground.
What happens when I turn this knob? And then this knob.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's kind of going crazy there. But, it's clear that those are two separate animals for him. I mean, again, back to the name. Machine drum. I think that's really his specialty, and the rest is kind of add-on. But I will just comment on one more thing. with this track, and that's, you called it a shimmering guitar. What was that again?
Yeah, a shimmering guitar. And actually, so I think we have our, what do you call it? We've crossed the streams here. So the organ that you're talking about, I think that's what I'm thinking is a shimmering guitar.
No,
that was
no,
at the very
the
beginning.
organ was the very beginning introduction
No,
of the song.
you're right.
Shimmering guitar, I know exactly what you're talking about. It is a separate element, and you're right. That was a great aspect
This
of
is
the
the
song.
fun thing to talk about music of this nature, because we're never 100%
Exactly,
on board
totally.
with the thing.
Well, 'cause
sometimes,
also-
usually we can identify these things, but when you add so many effects, you begin to lose track
Yeah.
of what is what instrument.
And
after
also
all.
when it's most of it's in theory coming from a computer to begin with, it's
Yeah.
like it's
Even
hard
if
to
It's
tell.
whatever he wants it to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. But
That's it. Well,
It's
that's
kind
the-
of
that's
like
the
a
goal of the
violin and
artist.
kind of like a cello, and it's coupled with maybe a little bit of porpoise.
That's the artist's goal, I think. Although I don't think he really wants you to see it as any particular instrument,
doesn't,
because then you
definitely
pigeonhole
not.
it. Once you hear the instrument, oh, that's just a kick-ass guitar solo, and that's all it's going to be. But
Right.
once he changes it up into something different, you accept the work
And he
as
does-
new, as
and he-
fresh.
And he does a lot of that in this record. I mean, warping or changing and shifting things to make them a little more than what they were. I mean,
Yeah.
the vocals are the best example of that on the record. Is the vocals sometimes sound like vocals, and then sometimes they sound like something completely different
Right.
because he's changing them to his will.
Well, going back to my last and final point, the only thing I was going to say is it in fact makes this more of a complex issue, because I was going to call it, if I'm correct, I was going to call it a whirring guitar. Not shimmering, I was going to call it whirring.
Yeah.
Two different words, same thing probably, though. We don't really know. In either case, I could describe to you where it was, and that was just really in the outro, primarily. It was in the outro when everything is sort of winding down,
Oh, no.
and you hear a guitar in the background that is...
Nope, that's different.
that is a, yeah.
It's a comping instrument. It almost is a solo, like in the background.
Yeah.
Very much in the background. But,
Yeah.
but it was a really, really nice effect.
I'm talking about the main 3 chords, like in the like towards the when the beat first starts to kick in, when the song really gets started.
Oh, then
It
that
actually
probably
starts-
was the organ. Then.
That actually no, it actually starts to parallel the organ. It's comped on top of it.
right.
It's like the main
Theme.
of the song. Yeah, it's the main character of the track.
Well, in the end, it just sounded like an organ.
I'm gonna
It wasn't an
email
organ.
him.
We
I'm
know,
gonna-
it
we
was
know
a
it's
computer.
not an organ.
It was a computer or a
But
machine drum.
For those of you listening along, you can
If
have
you
your own
will.
opinions.
Yeah, if you really want, you can pause right now and listen to it again.
Right.
And to be
John said it. You can have your own opinion.
And
It's
just so you
sanctioned.
know, the next 6 songs, we have no idea what any of the sounds are. So
Yeah.
look forward to that.
not true, I make some very
I got some ideas.
esoteric comparisons.
Esoteric comparisons,
Well,
always welcome.
speaking of the next track,
Not really.
Hops, why don't you take us into track
Sure.
5?
Yeah, how are you pronouncing this one?
Vision.
No, I said Vision.
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 It's
Vision.
Vision spelled as you normally would, but with a Z instead of an S.
Yeah. No,
so
this
it's
is
Vision.
This is
Vision.
an interesting song because it isn't really a song. It is an interlude.
Nothing on this track is a song. I mean, excuse me, nothing on this album is a song, because songs have
Well,
verses and choruses.
There may be
We're-
melodies.
We can either call them pieces or tracks.
This track is even less of a song than the others.
It is a sweeping interlude.
It's a sweeping interlude, and it belongs at either the beginning or near the end. And maybe that's just because I really liked the first song, I really didn't like the second song, and I really didn't like the third song, and I really liked the fourth song, and I was like, all right, here we go, we're getting into it. And as beautiful as song number 5 is, the momentum sort of goes down, right? And it doesn't feel... Like, when I listen to albums, I sort of listen to them as in 3-act structures, in the same way I watch, like, a movie, right? And this just did not fit in where it was placed.
Well, I'm totally with you on viewing it as a movie. We often go down that route where we try to see them as 3 acts and
Right.
whatnot. But it's starting to become apparent that I may like this album for all the opposite reasons as you do. Because holy crap,
Yeah.
this track right here. First of all, I think it functioned perfectly where it fell. I mean, you say either beginning or end that pins it as either an intro or an outro, which often can equally be lumped into the interlude, and that is exactly where it falls. It's dead center in the middle of the album.
It definitely belongs at the beginning more than it would belong at the end.
I'll
say
follow that because it has some exposition-oriented
Yeah.
material to it. It definitely, I don't think it would serve as a good outro. But to me, it works as the dead center of this album. It's tougher for me to convey in words to really describe the progression of this track, because it is just almost the whole thing is a singular soundbite. There's not as much progression, but that's exactly why it is an interlude. And the reason I like it so much, I can define that. And that is one word, which I think I've used before, and that is micropolyphony. Micropolyphony.
No, I don't think you've used that one before.
So why don't you explain...
Is that different from monopolyphony?
Is it different from
Mono... Too many things to comment on. First of all, you cannot have monopolyphony, because monopolyphony that would completely cancel each other out. Poly is many, mono means one. That would just be
So micropolyphony.
Well, there's like polyphonic synths.
Now that's a thing.
So
that is a thing. Very strange though. The micropolyphony was something that was used. Anyone ever see 2001: Space Odyssey?
Yes.
Yes.
We all have.
Do you recall the male vocals that were starting exactly that, and how they sort of shift over time, and the chords change very, very gradually. Oh. Well, that's what the synth was doing here. Chords shifting, but not all at once. All sort of, kind of gradually, or at least it gives off that effect. And I really love that kind of thing, because all of a sudden when you take the beat out of the picture and it's just synth work, it can be very spine-tingling.
Well, that effect is what gave it its kind of breathy and airy kind of feel. This like open feeling.
Yes.
It felt very, very vast and open.
But at the same time, I think that's why it does not work for me on an album level. While it did feel... I'm feeling everything you're talking about. Yes, I understand everything you're talking about. But because it really doesn't have that connecting idea between any of the other songs... This little bit right here feels more like that 2-minute outro we've gotten in other pieces. Yeah. It felt like the ending of Infinite Us, but just the ending. Didn't have that cohesive nature that made it a piece as opposed to just a ditty.
Yeah, well, you know,
I follow that, but I tend to give it the pass when you're talking about an interlude, which I can't see it as anything but, and it's the perfect place for it. There really is nothing else in the album that comes close to it.
That's another thing. I don't feel like this album really needed an interlude.
What, being only 10 tracks long? Is that what you mean?
No, because of the actual nature of its progression, the nature of the tempos that we're working here. I'm not feeling like I need a cool down. I'm not feeling like I need a build.
Not yet, anyway.
I just want to keep going in this stream that I'm working in here.
Well, here's the thing. Interlude is sort of I use it loosely. It doesn't work as an interlude to the same extent as we've heard in other albums. It's not like a complete break from content here. There's a lot that's tied into me. That pattern of micropolyphony, for instance, I'm going to connect that, and I think we're going to use that as a roll off to the next track here. But it's also present in several other tracks, in places. Perhaps not for the entirety of the track, but in places throughout. So, for at least in terms of the pattern that was begun in Infinite Us, the second track, that whole vastness, that space that you mentioned, Matt, that to me, that is a running theme here.
No, yeah.
Or at least the running arc.
I have to agree with Steve. I think that the track placement is fairly... I mean, I do agree that I would have liked... I don't know that I would have mind Rise and Fall, which is the next track that we're going to get to in a minute, to follow Center of Your Love. I think that would have been okay. Right. But I like what track 5 is doing, because I refuse to say the title again. Because I don't want to stumble over it. I think Steve's right. I think it's an interlude in the fact that it is a very short piece. Yeah. But it's not necessarily breaking up the album. But I can also... even though I don't agree, I can understand where John and Hops are coming from.
Right.
If you weren't really so happy with the beginning of the album and you were finally getting on board with track 4, track 5 could stumble that, and I get that.
And what would be interesting, and I don't want to tell Machinedrum how to make his albums, but if this song had sort of bled into Rise and Fall, or if Center Your Love bled into Vision. I think that would have been interesting. I like when that happens, where you can't tell where the song has ended and where the next one has began. And I think that it's just so secluded. It just feels so like deserted from the rest of the album.
And that's where my main argument comes from, because we have an example of another...
I simply don't agree with that.
We have another example list. Wait, and then refute. Which is probably good advice for me.
Thank you for telling me what to do.
Summit the Mountain, Evergreen, is a very similar stylized track.
What was the mountain off of?
Summit the Scale. Wait, what?
You were saying two different things.
I know. Evergreen.
Evergreen was off of Scale the Summit.
Scale the Summit. Summit
the
Mountain.
Migration. Episode 67. Refer.
Freudian all over the place. Scale the Summit. Evergreen. That track was in the same vein as Vision.
Right.
It was short, sweet, and to the point. And it was really a very big turn from the rest of the album. Very simplified, very cut down, very much a more drawn out moment. But I see that Evergreen works so much better, in my opinion. It felt more cohesive with the rest of the album than Vision does.
See, it depends on how you view it. I think, just going back to what Matt said, we could easily, if we're going to play devil's advocate all around here, you could easily discuss this album in from two different perspectives. Like, well, if you like this thing, then you're going to like, well, these tracks specifically. But then if you like this thing, you're going to like exactly the opposite tracks, which seems to be exactly the way we're going with this album.
Well, and also I feel like some of these comparisons are like apples and hand grenades. Like, the comparison is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, that's the thing. I kind of agree with that too. But at least to your point about Evergreen, I mean, I understand how Evergreen... First of all, interlude is a dicey word. I don't want to pin everything down that everything needs an interlude or that everything doesn't need an interlude. Evergreen was a special case. It sort of broke up the album, yes, but it was sort of toward the end. I wouldn't say that it really divided it. It didn't perform the same role of interlude as Disclosure did in Godsticks and Visit's Conundrum, because that came right before a trilogy. You got a trilogy after it. That is clearly Act 3. No ifs, ands, or buts. But in this particular case here, I use interlude very, very loosely, because it generally is tied in, and I will make that point later.
And that's the same case I'm making. I'm saying in both cases I don't feel that they're interludes. In this case, it didn't really work as well for me. It lost cohesion to my ear.
We're back and forth about this.
Yeah,
so I say we move on, and I'm going to revisit
Rise and Fall.
Points.
Guys, I think the song actually might be called By Zion.
Seriously?
Yeah, I think I just Googled it. Actually, didn't just Google it. I'm lying. But By Zion. All right, moving on.
That could be that actually.
That changes absolutely everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
Moving on to track 6, which is one of my other favorite tracks, Rise and Fall. It's Rise, the letter N, Fall.
We're gonna have to stop explaining these names because they're getting complicated.
Rise and Fall.
The next one gets more complicated.
So he can say it, and it sounds infinitely more simple.
That's true. So this one, I mean, Steve pointed out from the minute it gets going, it has a very kind of almost Middle Eastern vibe. Both in instrumentation and vocal work, it's got this kind of layering that lends to that kind of a sound.
Well, he's on sort of a Phrygian-ish scale.
It's the progression of the chords more than anything else that give it that sort of Middle Eastern classic style.
Also, his inflection. Also, it's kind of a moan, sort of that rising up like someone yelling from a mosque, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the song a lot. And the beat is very jungle, and I actually don't like jungle at all, but I actually like it a lot here. And I think there's a part that we can all agree is quite lovely, about 4.5 minutes in, when the whole song just goes up an octave.
That rising strings.
Yeah. It's good stuff. But yeah, all around, smooth vocal samples, love muted bass, and again, the synth pads and the reverb makes it full. I think it's a solid track.
Yet I will say that it feels a little bit more simplistic comparatively to something like Infinite Us or Center Your Love. It didn't seem to transform as often and as dramatically as those other songs.
It's funny because I think this song does what Infinite Us sort of fails to do, because the structure is very similar, but it's just an altogether more interesting song. Like, I like the sounds more. Going back to that, because we can't really identify what they are, we can only really identify them unless it's blatantly a guitar or blatantly a piano.
We make illusions.
Right. I mean, they're sounds, so we can only identify with them as sounds.
Like,
I think the sounds
that
he created in this song are just more aesthetically pleasing than
and
they
that's
are in
where I'm going to
Infinite
say
Us.
It is fascinating how I always disagree with half of what you say. Always.
In Infinite Us, I actually preferred the sounds to Rise and Fall.
Oh, really?
This one, it just didn't grip me the same way, and it really was nothing to do with the beat. Where it was just I liked the chords better in Infinite Us, but I definitely see the similarities between the two. I felt like there was more complexity in Infinite Us, where here until about halfway through when things really do start to spin around, the first half kind of. This was one part where I kind of felt a little bit drawn out.
Oh no!
This is one of the few times on the entire album I felt like it was getting to be a little bit too drawn out.
We are seriously going in 4 different directions.
Oh yeah, because
this is fat. We have not disagreed this much.
Because I completely.
I think we're all very much
disagreeing.
We're on the same page.
We're
on
feeling
how much
this
we like
album very different.
I completely disagree with John saying about it feeling like a drag. This song, Rise and Fall, it really felt, I thought, like a movement, almost like someone in front of a mosque or even an army, like rising up. I mean, it felt very engaging and it pulled me in from the moment it started. I don't feel that it dragged at all.
Well, even
and
that...
it has some of my favorite vocals on the record. There are some other moments that I like more, but the vocals on this I thought were just a great instrument that added to the sound.
There's my segue. The vocals. Because even beyond the intro, which, yes, the intro sounds a little bit Middle Eastern, but I don't even want to use that as a point to harp throughout this track, because once the vocals really kick in, this is a much better example of micropolyphony than the previous track. And that is where it's related, because it's fascinating. This does almost exactly... It performs the same function that the synth did in the previous track as the vocals are doing here. And that, to me, it was an absolute brilliant follow-up, and that connects the previous track to me in a beautiful way. To all the other points that you're saying, I could go any number of ways with this, because, I mean, for starters, yes, I feel that I would say this is maybe on par with Infinite Us in terms of all-around complexity. They give me the same, they leave me with the same feeling in the end, I guess I could say. But Vision, well, I guess none of us are really arguing that Vision, I mean, complexity, I'm not even going to go back and forth between what's more complex, what's less complex. It's just what works and what doesn't.
Right.
So, to me, this is a point in the album where I really needed them to step up the ball. Because it's true, in Vision, it's true that it is, as it's just a shorter track, and even though I feel it works, it is a snapshot. It's a snapshot in time. This track does evolve, and I really, really love it for that reason. I love the fact that the chorus is almost exactly what you'd hear out of 2001 Space Odyssey. Again, I forget exactly who wrote that piece. I want to say it was Ligeti. I don't remember the first name, but the composer's name was Ligeti, who wrote that piece that I described in 2001 Space Odyssey, where all the male vocalists are just rising up and up and up, and they're overlapping, and the chords change ever so gradually. It's just, it's fascinating to be immersed within that world. 10 times more complex here, and in this case, I will say that complexity probably is aligning itself with my interest.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful.
Wasn't it, though?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Wow. But I think...
And I really... Hang on. I really want to hear... There's something I want to speak of. I'm going to have to re-listen to this, because if you're saying it connects so dramatically to Vision, I mean... You're going to have to point that one out.
To my ears. They were using the same... It was the same technique, as I noticed, between the synths in Vision and the vocals in Rise and Fall.
Because to me, like, it wasn't until the strings really get into this, and
that was an earlier point. An earlier point that Hops made. You did mention that the strings kick in a little bit later, and that is just another layer to this, which kicked in the background to the vocals. I still think the vocals are prime here.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
But the strings were really, really nice compliments. Sort of a very, very high note hovering over everything else.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I really felt was lacking in the first half of the song.
See, I don't know. I didn't think it had a place in the first half of the song. I think it came in exactly where it was meant to.
I agree.
And I like that how, while we are lining up in certain paths, this song we all fired like super balls in separate directions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just ricocheting off each other.
Super balls.
Which was kind of awesome. I'd like to take us into the next track, which is track 7. This is CC. The first way spelled like I see you. The second C spelled like the sea, the water. You're welcome.
Thank you.
See.
I see. Yeah.
See here. See.
Well, you see.
Where's my giant Knoxville cigar?
Right.
The collection of salted liquid.
Thank you, John.
Had to go that extra mile. He
Always has to. So, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about this song.
No. There is one thing that it introduced, which actually becomes a kind of a running theme in the latter half. We talked about these like underground undertones, and this is really where we hit some underwater style of snare tapping work. Mm-hmm. It almost starts with like wet wood tapping together.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, well, wet is kind of a strange one because I almost want to save the word wet for the very, very last track on the
album. It's almost like a cowbell, sort of. It's like yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Going back to you, John, you say how you love chimes, right? And this track used them, well, as you would say, didn't misuse them, I guess. You don't like misused chimes, and this used it really, really well. It was part of the intro.
Scat beat hi-hat type of a situation
That's
going on there.
That's a good way to put it. It was playful. Very, very playful. Playful, delicate chimes, wood blocks on top of it. I think that's what you notice is the wet wood.
Yeah.
I believe they were wood blocks. And sort of a pipe organ-y bass
The
thing.
deep percussion did comp those other two parts well. And this
All
is where
that combined,
deep,
very playful.
That
Most
deep
playful in the album.
comping is what I really think actually brought those two almost competing noises together. And it became a little bit of wearing. It went through phases for me. This one was not through and through great, but had great moments. You like to harp on that. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I know it comes out as a bad way, but
I'd like to observe
and I'm going to harp on that
and
here.
Note that and describe it when I see it. Yes,
I'm harping here. The moment by moment was what was great about this, but not every moment was great for me.
Yeah, see, I couldn't get past the vocals in this track. They just were so kind of awkward and they another like song where it stuttered. It had this haltering way, and I didn't like it. And I get that was the point,
great,
but it wasn't. It wasn't
the choppy C.
Great is loosely used, and okay, great. So imagery wise, it succeeded in what it was going for. And if that does it for you, sure. But for me,
the title imagery is so great on this album, though. It really does an excellent job of showcasing
yes and no.
what the music is doing here.
Most of the time, but I just felt like in this song, the vocals really threw me out of it.
Make your case, John.
What?
What do you see about the titles you were describing specifically?
Well, I was going to get to that later.
Vocals?
It's it's not just the vocals, but it's the actual progression of most of the songs. Really does speak to how these were named, how these tracks were named. CC, the first thing I'm thinking of is wet. The second thing I'm thinking of is more maybe some gull work, a little bit of the choppiness of the waist. Just thinking through
Enter
it.
gull.
No, there is
The
that.
foam hitting the
305.
shore.
Enter gull.
In this, it does ebb and flow, and it actually ebbs and flows for me. And one of the main detractors for this song was actually those really high-pitched tones. Kind of hurt my ears just a little bit. I did not enjoy hearing that, but everything around it brought it back down. It was high points, kind of foamy all around. It really did promote the seed, promote water
Sounds
movement.
like quite a mix for you. I want to get Hops in here.
I found this song very annoying. I thought it was very annoying. The main vocal sample, the way that he works with pitch with that sample, it drove me nuts. It's another case of the sound just took me completely away from the rest of the song.
And I'm more with Hops on this. I felt the same way. Once the vocals kind of really kicked in, it just distracted me from the rest of the song.
About halfway through, the sample actually goes away for a little bit, and it's funny because when it does, it's like, oh, there's actually so much beauty in this song, but I can't hear any of it because that freaking sample, and that drives me nuts. And I hear you hear a lot of this in his other albums too. He does a lot of this stuff.
It goes to show how a single sample can make or break. I mean, that's
absolutely
that's the problem you run into in this genre, which almost you don't have to concern yourself with other genres because you're a little bit more in line with every instrument has its place and whatnot. You can add things and take them out as you will, but as long as it has that basic, drum, guitar, bass, the four-piece band, a lot of times people really aren't going to harp over a single sound. But in this genre, chillwave,
The single sound is so important
it's
in
the
this
looping.
genre.
The looping is the problem.
It's the main character in this song. That sound that's driving me nuts is like right there. It's completely upstaging everything.
Well, so we have two negatives.
And
John is a little on the fence.
And I'm mostly positive, but still kind of negative with that high pitched noise.
And that drives me crazy.
That was not enjoyable in the moment.
Surprise, surprise! I love this song.
Hey.
I think this was one of the best songs on the album track.
It's the scat hi hat and the playfulness in that, and that really what makes me love this song.
Well, I'm going to try to get through this. I'll get through it quickly. Here's the thing. Apart from that intro, no, actually still on that intro. The intro itself has a climax to it just within the intro, which I found very alluring before it really dives into the main content of the piece. And that was this sort of vocal, combined with the pipe or bass thing. It's sort of a holler 4 even times, right with the beat, with a slight bend just flat of the 7th chord. That's where the beat falls, and it falls just 4 times. So for that one single 4/4 measure, it's actually a climax within the intro. So it's like you get the holler with the vocals, and then it's answered with the woodblock. So holler, woodblock. I thought that was absolutely gorgeous as a climax. From there, the intro grows a little bit less organic, less playful, less delicate as what I described earlier, and a little bit more mechanical. So the entirety of it just phases in and out with the beat, and I thought it was a very fascinating and very abrupt fallout. Enter in with the vocal edit break, where everything is what I described to be a little bit more Prefuse 73 oriented, where they play around with vocals and sort of snap it off right at the climax. So your roll off of a person speaking is just very, very sudden. There is no decline. There's no decay. That's the word I'm looking for. Instead, it's just sudden, and then phase in another thing, and then sudden break. Phase in another thing, sudden break. I'm not always 100% down with this, but I thought it was really, really clever the way he used it as an intro to the main content of the piece. So that's just one other thing. Apart from that, there's sort of an electrical hum that is an overtone for most of this piece. Again, it has something to do with the edit work at play, but it's very mechanical at this point. It goes from organic to mechanical, but with that distinct break. I thought that itself was brilliant because it's sort of two opposite things. One unravels, enter the new thing. That to me, amazing. Yeah. It almost feels like a feedback surge was kind of just sent right into the system, and it's constantly trying to escape itself and return to the beginning. That, again, brilliant.
I would like to interject.
Any of this?
No, I'm going to throw some...
I know this is a mouthful.
I'm going to throw some metaphor at you and kind of have that whole feedback idea of the rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding of the sea, of the waves starting to pull itself in. That's more like that calm, that deep undercurrent that's creating the choppiness. You know what I'm getting at?
I want to be on board with you.
It's that deep interplay of the dark, hot sea current hitting the dark, deep, cold sea current, creating that surface tension that does spiral from down beneath.
Okay, that's kind of cool. You're still going out on a limb here, but I think it's kind of cool.
That description kind of that's what it says to me.
Well, at the same time, I'm just sort of describing point blank what I hear.
And here's where that symbolism of the title name really works with the song. That's what I'm getting at.
I'll just wrap this up quick. This to me was expertly composed, in my opinion, from an electronic music standpoint. Perhaps not from a band standpoint or even a techno standpoint, but just from electronic music itself, and using those playing around with attack and decay of certain soundbite structures. That to me is where the expert composition is really going on here.
I think what it comes back to is what you're looking for in the music, too.
Yeah.
Is so different from what other people might be looking for.
I didn't expect it, because actually I would say that this track is very different from any other track on the album.
Yes, but you tend to still look at things very analytically. I mean, we all do. But you tend to sometimes take it to another level, whereas also, I know for a fact, if I find something that I hone in on that's distracting and disengaging, it's hard for me to look past it. And I think that's the biggest problem me and Hops had, is once we noticed a thing, we couldn't unnotice it. And it kind of ruined the rest of it. So I'm curious to hear it again, and maybe I can see past it to hear all that stuff.
Don't want to lose you clapping.
I clearly had that problem with the third track on this.
Right.
We both had that problem with the third
it
track on
happened.
this.
Both.
Yeah.
But, although I will return to one thing, though. I think you had said it was the more... Which track was the more comfortable, the most comfortable for all
Center
of
Your
you?
Love.
Center Your Love.
Center Your Love.
That's the funny thing. This was the one track that I noticed was the more comfortable for me because it was more positive.
Oh, that is so strange.
I know, isn't it? It's more positive to me. It's a more
Don't
playful...
say it. Shut up, John.
Pops, this is why I say that Steve is wrong from time to time.
He's
not
not
wrong.
wrong.
I know. He's not, in fact, wrong on this
He's not wrong.
one. But he's not 100% right on this one.
See, Matt was thinking that he was going to go into...
everyone
listens to music differently.
Right.
And in case I'm not wrong, I'm most right, and I think I'll leave you on that note.
I'm probably most right. And
I'm going to just take us into the next song and talk over you because I really want to move into the next one.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's true, you will.
You still lie.
So
Track
still
number 8.
So this song for me, I mean, it's no secret that I tend to latch on to the most emotional. While it might not be the most emotional track on the record, from the moment it starts, from that first synth beat, it's more in-your-face 80s than Center Your Love was, and it was so powerful. You just got this feeling, like this kind of... I don't even know how to really describe it, but it just... there was a connection.
I do.
What?
And I love to make fun of this band I'm about to use, but in this case, it's a compliment. This was a U2-esque introduction.
Because U2 wasn't always bad.
No, they weren't always bad. And this really had that kind of arena rockish kind of a feel to its beginning, which I think did a great job of trying something different on the album itself, and it started something different with this song.
All right. Just one thing here. All right. Do you remember that point earlier? I'm talking to the mic here, not even you guys. Remember that point earlier when I said there was an 80s, sort of a general 80s vibe, and that had to do with the organ? That might have been... I forget.
It was back there. It was back earlier.
Any case, this to me goes full blasts, balls to the wall, just 80s, immersed in 80s. And it's not just one soundbite here, it's the entirety of the track.
The most telling feature was that echo clapping breakdown towards the end of each...
Oh, that was one.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me.
It's in the bass. It's in the sort of misty backdrop. It makes you feel like you're in a really, really campy love movie, a romance film from the 80s. And the drum machine itself. The drum machine itself sounds like it just shaved about 20 years off its life. And the whole vibe, I just can't escape it. I mean, maybe this is sort of a minor point. Who really cares, I guess, if it's 80s or not? But considering you heard U2 out of this, I guess... I'm definitely not the only one hearing it.
No, it's definitely there, but I think that's what engaged me so powerfully, is those old U2 tracks, if we're going to compare it to that, were very engaging and emotional. They were very kind of bigger, larger than life almost.
This is where I'm a little bit on the fence here, because you could go either way. Like, yes, I understand the emotional impact that it carried at the time. And to some extent, yes, still do. But not... everybody, and everyone has to be fair about this, there was a lot of things that out of the 80s that really, really were campy.
Well, of course.
There was a lot of romance films that came out campy, and if that's what I see here in the beginning, I can't feel the same emotional weight as you do, because it's a little bit more of a tried and true kind of thing. Like, I might have felt something in 1986. But
are you talking smack about the Breakfast Club right now?
Not even on the Breakfast Club, not even touching it.
Well, if you want to talk campy. But the composition here, and this really was very, very well blended. I think it's a little. It's not as composed as the other stuff.
It was how safe a route.
No,
this was more of a blend of each of the pieces going together, and for that, I just love the way it flows. It was so cohesive. I really did fall in love with this track.
It was the closest structure to a pop verse chorus structure that we got on the record.
Yes, because it's the closest thing you have. I mean, verse chorus,
There's
but
almost
yes,
a melody.
there's a distinct break.
Yeah.
You get a new section, and it is a climactic section. You might as well call it the chorus. Not really any vocals going on.
No.
No.
Well,
But-
there's the main
You Still Lie.
"You Still Lie" vocal.
right. But was that in the chorus point? I don't think that was in the chorus. I'm not sure.
That was all over.
I think that was in the verse.
I mean, there's
quote unquote verse.
Yeah, right. It's it breaks a couple times, and that sample goes away, but it's in a good amount. I mean, I just want to say this is my favorite song on the album.
Interesting.
It's definitely the, I don't want to say least complex, because that's not nice to Mr. Machinedrum, but it's definitely
more
even the songs
pared down, perhaps.
Yeah, even the songs that I find annoying and don't quite like, I can still see the craftsmanship in them. Right, and there's a lot of work that went into all of these songs. But
this is a little more natural.
This one's a little more natural. It just flows out of the machines. It's very simple. The most complex it gets is when the synth, all of the synth sounds that we hear in the song all come together towards the end, and it swells. There's no percussion. It all just swells, and it's this like gorgeous, like room-filling sound, and it just feels so good.
Well, I'll go halvesies on you again here, because this probably has one of my favorite moments in the album, and yes, it is that exact moment.
That's my favorite moment on the album.
That was pretty bizarre, and I would say that also it works with that, quote unquote, very loosely verse chorus structure that this is set up. I'm not as into the verses. Maybe that's because that's where I really can't escape the cheesiness. But it really takes off once it hits that first chorus. And we're not even at the end quite yet. But once it hits off in the first chorus, the new instrument center, of course, a new variety of synth that almost mimics brass, like a very, very high-end tinny brass. But it's kind of that cheesy, whiny sound. But it's the cheesiness and whininess that I think really easily fits the mood.
And that
it's like a synth lead, I think, is the technical.
See, you say cheesy, I say endearing. I mean,
and it's very
we're splitting hairs a little bit here, but
I'll say
joining the whininess. And
it's got a very heartfelt nature throughout the whole song,
yes.
And it's really when those quote unquote choruses come in that it really it does swell, it does get more energized, but it really feels the most like brittle at that point. Where if one element were to go wrong, it really would fall apart.
Okay, that's a fair. I am totally with you on that.
And let me say that there are elements of this song that are very 80s, but when I listen to it, to me, it's very clear that it was not made in the 80s. Like, you can tell that he's taken certain things that either he likes, or even it might be coincidental. He may have been on his synths or in his software, and he like recognized himself like, that sounds great, let's do that. And then afterwards he's like, oh, it kind of sounds 80s. But like with the reverb and all the effects that he's applied to it, it may be like early 90s David Lynch in a certain way. But I definitely that. And even then, like what's his name, Angelo Badalamenti, I think is the name of the guy who does his films.
Not familiar with that one.
He would take like jazz and like older sounding musical genres and add his own like twist to them. He would just drench them in effects. And I feel like Machinedrum is doing the same sort of thing here, because it does sound very modern to me. With elements of 80s. So I think he's like doing his own thing with it.
Well, to be fair, I mean, to be frank about this is not a major point. And for me, describing the 80s aspect here, it's really not that major a point.
Right. It's not
I don't think that really hurts this track too much. And it does have a lot going for it, and I think it really does boil down to that build up and that end.
Mm-hmm.
It's even if I was not as drawn in by the quote unquote verses, the choruses are really, really what took off for me. Again, I would loosely describe that point, that climax point, as brass, but it's only because, just to go back to what you said, John, you mentioned it as sort of brittle at that point, that it could
brass
fall apart
element that
because it is so high, it feels like it could break, and it's emotional. It's very, very emotional.
And that swell is what really solidifies the emotionality of this song.
Right. Well, that's one swell, and then it comes up again, and when it comes up again at the end, and this is the one where I think me and Hops are aligned with, that's the build up that really sets things off. It's very slow. The beat in the background just gets louder and louder and louder as it approaches the final build-up. And it's just...
It's very tense and
very passionate.
Mm-hmm.
It's intense,
totally.
it's passionate, it's... I want to mention something about the title here, You Still Lie. Obviously, there's a lot of emotional weight within that.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like, especially in the verses, it feels like he's a little bit beaten. But yet, when you consider the choruses and the final build-up, there's sort of a little bit of a fiery soul left at that moment. And I think this is going to be the bounce off to the next track here.
Well, can I say one more thing about this? Yeah, it's funny because the "You Still Lie" vocal sample is probably the most drawn out vocal sample on the album.
Yeah,
it probably takes up more time as far as bars go, or I don't know, signatures,
right,
than any other sample on the album. And the repetition, it's this like grueling feeling, like you're still lying. And it feels like you're going to be lying forever. And these drawn out vocal samples just like hammer
and that way.
It's almost
it feels
nauseous.
Very, it feels very
right,
introverted
exactly.
in that way. It is nauseous. It's very introverted. It's very this track is coming from himself. It's not so much a more worldly broad
This
track.
is another
as others we've had.
Very personal.
Yeah,
personal,
which we've already had to some extent earlier in the
quite
album.
a bit,
but still pleasing to other ears.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
But it is, I think, a great setup for the next track, which is one word: I don't lie.
No,
eyes. And I want
it's eyes don't lie.
don't lie.
I'd like to explain
eyes
something
don't
about
lie.
eyes don't lie. That's what he said. So here's the thing. You almost get two things from this. Of course, eyes don't lie. You look into someone's eyes, and whether they're lying or not, well, probably not. They're not going to lie. If you know someone's eyes, know their face, know whatnot. But it also sounds like something else. It sounds like, I don't lie, right? Or if you're going to do a play on words, I''Z, eyes don't lie. Kind of a silly thing there. But I think it's prevalent when you consider the way that's interspersed throughout the track. You get the female vocalist now, not the male, not him or whoever it is, but you have a female voice who comes in to say, eyes don't lie. And at many points, it still sounds like she's saying, I don't lie. So it's sort of playing around with those halted loops again, sort of modulating. So sometimes you hear the clear, crisp female voice saying, eyes don't lie. And then she gets deeper in tone,
and
until it's almost guttural, evil sounding at some point.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very clear answer to the previous. You still lie, as in the person asking, explaining it to himself that you still lie, said person. Follow-up track, you have the person herself coming in to say, I don't lie, and it gradually gets distorted.
But at the same time, it's almost like he's reinforcing his statement.
That's why it's the eyes don't lie. That's why there's the double entendre
Right.
there. Eyes don't lie is the reinforcement, because it's him saying, well, eyes don't lie. How could she possibly still be lying, even though I just explained to myself that she's not? And then it's sort of a testament to the always changing and sort of shape-shifting nature of the human voice, which is, I mean, of that modulation in general, which is great symbolism for lying. The sort of many faces, or in this case, many voices of deceit.
And I really, the repetition of that vocal bit becomes amazingly complex. The modulation, the reverb that gets thrown on it. At times, there's no hard consonants in what she's saying. There's no D. There's no T.
There's a D.
No. When you hear it, you don't hear the D. You don't hear the T.
It's soft.
It becomes eyes don't lie, and becomes slurred. It becomes degenerate. It's usually coupled with that heavy dropout in the more B section of
he
the song.
processes the hell out of the sound.
And it becomes not just guttural, but bestial.
Warped and
Bestial.
twisted.
It's twisted.
The thing I like about
You
this,
guys are light words. I went straight for evil.
well, yes, but the thing I like about the
Don't feel
vocals,
evil.
When it was at its lowest, I'm sorry, that felt evil.
the thing I like about the vocals most in this track, and I had said earlier that the vocals really hit their stride towards the end. With this song, the vocals aren't even individual movements, they bleed from movement to movement. It bleeds through the track.
Yeah.
To the point where when the heavy distortion and warp is on those vocals, it barely sounds human and bleeds through into the next section where he brings it back and it does sound human again.
Well, to boil what I said down to just layman's terms, I mean, just as a description here, if someone said, I don't lie, why wouldn't you believe them, right? If someone said, I don't lie, I think you'd maybe have a second guess about it. And that's essentially what this song does. It takes that sample and twists it and contorts it, as you said.
Simply using speed, tone, and adjustment to convey multiple emotions with the same phrase recorded.
As I said, the many voices of deceit.
But the whole crux of this story, this almost joke we're getting, is that it's the same exact words, and it's just the ability for your ear to hear something as simple as this phrase and yet construe it and misconstrue it 1,001 times just by replaying it over and over and over in your mind. And that's what this becomes to me. This is a memory that's just, you don't know how to take it. This is worry. This is worry in so many different ways. The back and forth of the heavier, speedier snare with deep chords going back and forth, and then going into those really deep, dropped out part Bs, and then back into a similar yet reimagined A. It's sort of that back and forth of how do you take it? You remember that event and you're trying to make it better in your mind, but you can't do it. And I got so much out of that song.
It's like a struggle almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so much of reflective memory. This almost is my favorite song on the album.
Yeah, it's
almost is.
It's definitely the best crafted song on the album because it goes through so many, like you've been saying, it goes through so many different changes. There are parts of this song that sound completely different than other parts of the song, and it's the first song on the album that's done that.
It doesn't lose its cohesion, though.
No, it doesn't.
Because of the repetition of the vocal.
Right. The vocals keep it all there. Whether, I mean, they change drastically throughout the song in a very great way.
But the tempo remains the same, and the vocals are present.
The drum sounds stay the same, even if certain drums are taken away. It's the best beat work on the album, without a doubt.
The phasing's great. The layering is great.
Best beat work.
Well, in terms of overall craft, I mean, seeing as you say this is the craftiest track on the album, it's kind of a funny one for me because I had previously thought that would either be, at least again to my ears, it would either be track 2 or track 7, exactly the opposite of where you're at. Right. But I will probably agree that this track here, because it's really a runner-up for me, that it maybe is the craftiest because it actually adds theme. I mean, that's one thing that I can't say for track 2. Except for track 2, of course, that had the ineffable quality that I described, that sort of vastness of the cosmos thing, which almost is a little bit separate, although it pops up in various other tracks here. But this has a distinct theme. There's no escaping it. Mm-hmm. I mean, subject is lying, and that's it right there. You almost don't have to go beyond that. This is an experimental electronic music piece. This takes one theme, one soundbite, and plays around with it infinitely. That to me is a whole separate form of craft. So I'm probably going to jump on board that this is the most crafty track on the album.
Yeah, and what's funny about that is that the most danceable song on the I can see a DJ
that I wouldn't agree with.
I could see a DJ at a club spinning this and people going nuts over
I definitely see a mashup available for this to really doing some nice heavy club music going on.
That, believe it or not, that in fact was CC for me. That was my most danceable track. I'd be all over that in any club.
How funny. What's also interesting about this song for me is those uncomfortable and almost annoying moments I was talking about, like with CC. It almost hits that point in this song, but it only gets to a certain point where it adds to the theme of the song and the struggle.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't get to full on, like, get out of my ear. It gets to this almost point where it's like, I'm going to make you uncomfortable, but you're still going to be really interested in what I'm doing here.
Well, that's
and you're still going to be able to hear everything else that's going on in the song.
This one I think is probably more approachable that way, because everyone's been at that point in a relationship where you start to suspect and you have those issues starting to develop, and is she cheating on me, or is he doing this or is she doing that? And it's that point where you think things are starting to fall apart, but you don't want to convince yourself. That's what I'm getting here.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that inner argument there is almost comparable to what we were getting back in Don't Want to Lose You. Even though that just we weren't having it from a musical perspective, there was that molding nature there with that beat.
Which is why I like that choppy. That choppy,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, points for theme, for sure.
Definitely.
I think we ought to go to the final track now.
Yes, track 10, Baby It's You, the letter U.
Baby It's You.
Done that a bunch. So, this song takes an interesting start. It's mostly sound bites and sound effects to start. Mm-hmm. Percussion, almost like water droplets. This is where...
Not even, it's almost ripples. It's ripples itself, and using that as beatwork.
Somebody said bones.
Yeah,
before.
cracking knuckles.
Oh, yeah.
It almost gave the illusion of both rainfall and cracking knuckles.
It could be bones, actually. I saw it as like two hollow sticks, but you could also sort of get a similar sound off of bones themselves. And it's like they're crackling together. That, combined with the water rippling, everything is just so popping and
we
crisp.
also said it kind of sounded like a washboard with spoons running across it too.
Well,
that's heavy percussion.
That's because it in the beginning here.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it's sort of everything is crisp. As I said, it pops out at you. It's very crisp, but you can't even avoid it. But then later, as the track develops, that kind of gets fused into it, where it needs to kind of take a back seat to everything else going on. It's still very integral, but that's when we sort of perceive it more as a washboard, rather than hearing the individual droplets of water or ripples.
Which is kind of unusual, because what gets introduced is a very cottony kind of muffled guitar work, cottony kind of muffled bass work, bass strings. They're very much that, it's speaking to the water effect, or even the underground bones connection, of being, deep, no real crispness. It's very much the reverb vibration. A lot of the high end has been caught off of these notes.
Well, the whole intro, where it's mostly just sound effects, is this organic, underground, if you will, feeling. This kind of the earth sound.
Or bubbly, deep, currenty sound.
Right, but either way, very of the earth, very kind of natural almost.
Dark.
But what really was intriguing is once the main meat of the song kicks in, you get a very soulful, I like to call it Brian McKnight almost sounding soulful singing. Baby, it's you. Just pretty much like that. And it gives this kind of heart to the song that also still feels very organic and natural with the rest of the instrumentation.
And I'll actually say that that heart is available in those bass strings, those almost cello-ish. It's almost heartbeat, and I feel like it's a heartbeat that was turned into a note.
I interpreted it more, at least when it first developed, it was a distant sort of muffled piano that sort of builds very softly, and then with a very distinct melody, it's sort of shrouded, but still distinct in its way. Very strange. And it was again a great use of texture, just like the beginning of the piece. You have that crisp sounds in the beginning. That's clear texture, and then here in the middle, even when more is going on, you maintain that same form of texture. It probably had the best example of texture in the piece, because that's one thing that I think it has over the previous. There's more edit work going on with the sampling in the previous, but texture is something. You're not sampling a vocal at this point. You're sampling just sounds. Actually reminds me of, and I may have mentioned this earlier, a piece that I did back in college where I actually had to compose an electronic music piece, and I had came up with this idea that I would use coffee, right? Coffee rippling, coffee pouring into a pot out of its dispenser, sugar packets sort of shaking and then pouring in, and the stirring, and I would combine those to sort of form some kind of piece. Wasn't that good? In any case.
Very hipster of you.
Yeah, well, at least I can say it was for an assignment, though. So, it reminds me of the type of things that were sort of discussed around back in that course, the electronic music center of how would you put it? What is really valued, I guess, out of an electronic piece. And texture is high on top. Because if you don't have notes to deal with, then texture is really all you have. And it kind of highlights that and makes you work more on it.
And it's the height of that soundbite idea, is the coffee thing you're talking about, and what they do here in the beginning of the song.
With the water.
Very natural sounds from natural things. Even if they weren't, even if it was all computer created, it still sounded like something that was physical.
Exactly.
And it kind of made the vocals almost comical. They weren't, but they were almost, because the rest of the song...
They were very well built, though, because it was that muffled, reverbed, echoey, all these adjectives being thrown here.
It sounded like he was singing from a cave, essentially.
Well, here's something we may never do again.
Built into clarity, and that really was that later rising tones, and that kind of wah-wah tone work that was thrown in there.
The muffled piano that I heard at some point, although I have a point about that later.
It rose so beautifully to him going from darkness to the light, to use the cave metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Or to go from the depths of the ocean rising above into the sky, and all these beautiful, pretty Disney-esque kind of ideas. But it really didn't come off as that cheesy kind of an idea. It really did build hope into the track.
Well, just to backtrack. Again, here's something we may never ever do again. But let's break down that title. Baby, it's you. What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
You're the one, baby. Baby, it's you.
That's probably
the only
the most simple way you can possibly describe that.
Well,
or it's you, not me.
What I think, though,
which promotes that darkness.
Baby, it's the letter U, as the title implies.
Sesame Street, right? Well,
there's no comma.
Baby, it's you.
It's you. That would be a perfect Sesame Street sketch if ever I've heard one.
It's not an EW, it's a U.
In retrospect, though, with the cave metaphor more strongly, the way that the vocal work is kind of echoing, it's almost as if this unknown male vocalist is on the search for this one person. They know who's the one, and they're trying to find them, as if they had lost them in the previous songs through that strife and hardship.
Or there's something physical about that. There's something organic about that.
Yeah.
Or a singular... bringing a singular person to fruition. That's the one you want. Yeah. That's all you care about. There's closeness involved there.
I have another idea. It could be the realization of the importance of this individual, and the coming to terms of going from in the dark to realizing what's going on.
And I'm the first to point out that a lot of these things could be just pulling out of our ass right here. But
which I'm very
good at.
What else
you have to go at? Oh, John is excellent at that.
But I'm surprised at how much you guys are ass pulling.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. You have nothing else to go off of considering in marrying the music and the vocals here. Because the vocals, they are really just used as music. The sound bites are sound bites, and that's almost it. But since you have a vague theme being built from the previous couple of tracks here, you almost want to keep that theme going. So when you link organic and closeness, there's something there. There is a connection there. Totally. I feel it.
Yeah, I had actually a very emotional response when I listened to this song last night. When I, to just, think about the album and really sort of get my head around it for tonight. And when I listen to this album, I see a man crawling out of the muck, essentially, right? It starts with this very simple, these simple sound. Well, they're not simple. They're, very complex sounds that are primitive, and then it's almost like this man coming out of this very primitive sound, and he's struggling to get his girl back, almost. Like, I see him crawling
out of the primordial soup.
Exactly, yeah. And
which I can definitely get from the opening.
And what's interesting about this song is halfway into it, you sort of forget where that sample began and where the song started to actually become a song. Because it's like it was like 3 minutes in. I was like, how?
It is a very gradual.
It's almost like, where did it start? Is this still the intro? And I love that about it. And that's one of the reasons why it feels like such a struggle and like somebody is crawling. It's almost like a last gasp or like a final love letter before we leave the album, which is quite beautiful.
It's actually a very strong conclusion track. I think it really gives that feel of finality, and not necessarily bad or good. It's kind of ambiguous in its finality, but it does feel like it's ending.
To a minor point, there's actually another thing that's ambiguous here, is that when that muffled piano started building softly, sort of toward the middle of the track, as I said, it was sort of with a very shrouded but kind of distinct melody. I immediately thought that was great use of texture itself, but after it grew, I found out that it was actually a guitar, or possibly a mandolin. So even that in itself, he kind of duped me, and that's ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because it started out, the way it was muffled, it had the resonance of a piano, and then it became more crisp as it went along. So a lot of this in the track is gradually evolving. Sounds in general.
I think it's a true mastering of sound and notes to be able to pull that kind of the wool over your eyes kind of a thing, you know?
And that actually lends to the whole theme work of the album, because I have to do this. It's a very tried and true kind of an idea, a very tried and true piece. This is a personification of a relationship. Probably a not very good one with the way some of these turns actually go, especially towards the end of it. It's reflective, yet in the moment at times. I do love that about this. There's a lot of evolution, and it's a lot of you have to take it as it comes along. And that's one of always been my favorite aspects of electronica music, is that it's very much a moment-by-moment enjoyment. And in this case, it builds upon its predecessors as the songs do progress, but it still retains that whole instantaneous kind of a feeling to it. I guess I'm doing the wrap-up.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you just before you do, because it's funny how the way you interpret electronic music is exactly the opposite of how I interpret it. I don't see it so much as moment-to-moment enjoyment. I actually see a lot of electronica as the whole. The whole as in not just everything that's happening vertically, like at that single moment, but also horizontally, within the extent of that loop, however long it chooses to drag itself out for. You kind of need to enjoy that as a whole first. That's not a moment-to-moment thing. That's breadth. You need to enjoy it in a longer span.
Well, I think that actually speaks to why I prefer the more ambient nature of electronica as opposed to the more clubhouse nature of electronica. Because the ambient nature is designed to build upon itself, but leave you feeling that emotional journey,
right?
And
but
to
even
go
then,
throughout the whole journey, yes, but to actually feel it through the snippets, the
it
moments.
does require patience.
Yes, but
more patience than a lot of other genres.
Yes, I will definitely attest to that. But in something like Clubhouse, it's actually more focused upon the momentary beat work, but you have to enjoy it on the macro scale. In the ambience, it's designed around the macro scale, but you have to enjoy it more on the individual second-by-second nature. It's sort of a duality here.
Well, I don't want to generalize, because there are lots of divisions of electronica that's just such a super umbrella genre.
Yeah.
But in this, I love the step-by-step, the piece-by-piece, and I see how it works as cohesive units. Because there's so much progression here. And this is my official wrap-up. There's so much progression here. There's so much going on here because the layering is amazing. The vocal work is not vocal work. It is just another instrument, and it's expertly used. There are some songs I don't like, which is going to happen on techno, ambient, or whatever other words you want to attribute to this type of an album. There are lots of things that you just are going to rub you the wrong way. Like simplified clapping beat. Oh my god, I could have done that in 10 minutes on Fruity Loops, kind of an idea. Or...
Well, not you, someone with talent.
Yes, exactly. I could have done when I was actually good at this.
We're going to sell a lot of Fruity Loops with this podcast.
Yeah, there we go. But
just him. He's the only one talking about it lately.
The imagery of the titles, and I really think that while I heard a lot of the imagery in the songs without knowing the title names, it does come to the forefront when you know what he's trying to create. I think it was expertly done. At the same time, I really heard nothing like groundbreaking, nothing magical. It was just really good to just kind of meh. But as a whole, it works great. I love the journey I went on here. The ending was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And Baby It's Us is my favorite song.
Baby It's You.
Baby It's You is my favorite song. I love the progressions of 8, 9, 10 and how they really do work. But it's, for me, it's Don't Want to Lose You, Rise and Fall, and Vision were a little bit of a letdown. I know everybody's going to have their own list. Because of that, this is a solid 4-star album. There's a lot of real goodness here. It doesn't have that macro monstrosity that we found in things like Boards of Canada or The Migration, but it's really got some. It's really, really good. It just, there's so many things it's evocative of that I just enjoy it.
So this album is one of those things where I find that initially it doesn't lend to my tastes. Initially, like when I first listened to Gunshota, which I can't say as good as Hobbs.
Gunshota.
There it is. When I first heard him, I was intrigued and curious about the record because I didn't really know I didn't know any of their previous work, and I don't know a lot of chillwave or even a huge amount of techno or house. I knew it in the 90s, but it's not really the same now. But I mean, Gunshot was intriguing enough to get me to Infinite Us, which I was kind of pulled into, and there were ups and downs to the whole record, although my short list of things that I was not really into isn't going to be the same as John's. On the whole, I mean, Machinedrum is doing something here that I disagree with John. I think is something new. Maybe the specific sounds and soundbite qualities isn't new, but what he's doing with it in some of these songs is completely unlike things I've heard before. I mean, I'm sure stuff like was done in Eyes Don't Lie has been done before, but to this degree, I think was another level, at least to me. Maybe it's just because I haven't heard enough of this genre. I mean, songs like Center Your Love, You Still Lie, Eyes Don't Lie, Baby It's You, I mean, these songs, Rise and Fall, I mean, really, even, I liked Vi Zion or Vision or Vision or whatever the hell we're calling it.
Vi Zion.
Vi Zion. Really the only song that truly kind of really rubbed me the wrong way were 3 and 7. Don't Want to Lose You and CC. Just, one was too repetitive for me and I couldn't see past it, and the other was those vocals, those halting, awkward vocals just pulled me out of the song.
And high-pitched tones.
But that's 2 songs out of 10 songs. That's damn good. Considering the albums I and we have given really great ratings where only 2 songs we didn't like. I mean, I went from initially only being okay with this album after the first listen to the second listen being, wow, I think I will actually listen to this more and listen to it again.
Don't go off a track percentage. Take the holistic route.
What?
Don't go off a percentage. Don't
no,
be like, well,
it's
two
not
guys
a percentage.
Six
it's not a percentage. It's just the fact that I can't judge it harshly for not liking 2 songs. I can't, because I've rated albums very high where I didn't like 2 songs. It's the reality that this album did something for me I didn't expect. I want to hear it again, a 3rd time, and maybe even a 4th, and more. It did grow on me, and I do like it. But I can't. It's not a 4.5. It didn't go to that next level like Steam Powered Giraffe does, and other bands I'm not going to list.
There's no magicness.
There was magic in moments, but not on the album as a whole. So for me, it's a 4.25. I was going into this thinking I was going to rate it in the high threes or 4. But it really is a 4.25. It goes a little bit past that next step, but between just the connection that you build, the arc that's clearly here, and the theme that's here. Even if it's not obvious everywhere, it's definitely an engaging album, and it's definitely an original voice for Machinedrum. And I don't know if that applies to his past works, but definitely this is a unique voice, and I'm interested to hear more of it. So that's where I stay with it.
All right. Very interesting. I could go so many routes with this album, so try to take the road least traveled. This, at least answering to what John said, there's very little on this album that I dislike. Actually, very little. Track 3 might be the only one. Don't Want to Lose You, and even then I'm not, dislike is kind of a heavy term for me, because in the end I am academically interested in that beatwork. I think that was fairly innovative. It may grow on me in a few years, who knows. A lot of times patterns just sort of need to set themselves in your brain. Apart from that, looking at an album here that is very in line with my tastes. Pretty much front to back. It speaks to the kind of chillwave is not a word that I ever used to really describe to it. It was kind of a recent word for me. Ambient is not a word that I would really use to describe it either. So I'm just going to try to describe a general vibe here. And a lot of it has to do with the kind of urban music that you would find sort of in an urban setting, in a densely packed environment where there's a lot going on. And that to me is conveyed by a lot of texture throughout this album. Now I know that's really not part of the theme, but often that's very rarely part of the theme. It's just the backdrop. It's the setting. It's that busyness that's found in a lot of techno or things of that ilk that I'm kind of attracted to. Things, just to cite some specific examples here, for instance, the backdrop, that very heavy reverb on synth that uses chords that broach the upper partials, like the 9ths, 11ths, as I said. Though that combination for me is just almost, I'm a sucker for it, just very, very easily. That said, I've heard so much of it at this point that it is tough to bring me something new within that genre. And that's, quote-unquote genre, just vibe, whatever have you will. And that's where this album really, really takes a strange turn. Because there are some moments where I think it is doing something drastically new within the genre. Or, as you said, Matt, for Machinedrum himself. Granted, I don't know his previous work, but he sounds very... There are moments where I think you can tell with any artist whether they're falling into old patterns or not, whether you've heard their old patterns at all. I think that's usually prevalent within the construct of certain tracks. You can tell whether certain tracks are just going to fall back into the same loop. It almost says that the artist is getting lazy. I don't detect laziness on this album. I really don't at all. In which case, I have to say this is fairly innovative, not just for him, but for music broadly. I will cite specific examples, though, with more than others. And those, for me, even though they separate from your lists, that is track 2, Infinite Us, track 7, CC, and moments of Baby It's You, and even You Still Lie. Those that brassy synth moments. But that's the thing. You're going to deal with moments and a lot throughout a work like this, not always full tracks. That said, he's still a great composer. He still puts them together very well at the end. So I almost have to take the objective route here and rate it more highly than I would just for pure emotional game. Because the emotional game is just on the tracks that I cited. Beyond that, it's almost like, it could be hit or miss with me. But objectively, it's still very well done compared to a lot of other electronic music we've done. So I'm gonna kick this up to 4.2. I would have probably left it at 4, but this gets my vote up.
So a little bit below me, and a bit higher than John. Where are you at, Hobbs?
All right.
Hobbs.
I like this album. I think it's a good album. It is the first cohesive album that he's done. And if you you should go back and listen to his other stuff, because there are hints in there of the work that we see on this album, but not a ton. He's actually half of a group called Sepulture, which does a lot of similar stuff to this, but it's not nearly as good.
What was that name?
Sepulture, not Sepultura. Yeah, Sepulture.
No, I know them.
Yeah, overall, I thought this was a good album. There are 3 songs that I did not like, but I still appreciated and still saw the craftsmanship in them. It's very concentrated work. I like albums that are 10 songs long, where they take advantage of every single minute that they have. The vocal samples are great, and they really complement the synth and make most of the songs sound very full. most of it the album sounds very monochromatic. When you first listen to it, it all sort of sounds the same, but when you pop on a good pair of headphones and really dive into it, you start to see a lot that you didn't see before.
It's crisp.
Yeah, it's very, very good work. It takes you to another place, too. Like the name Vapor City. When I listen to the album, those words, Vapor City, they really resonate with me, because when I think of, like, sweeping synths, I think of vapor, and I think of mist, and I think of, like, this sort of, like, ethereal atmosphere. And so I get a lot from that. And, yeah, like I said, even when it's bad or annoying, it's still well done, It really is that question of taste and what sounds you like. And the other thing, I think it's interesting, his use of sounds that are both tense and uncomfortable, and sounds that are very lush and beautiful. He does a lot of that, and to put those together, especially in Eyes Don't Lie, really sounds great. I've listened to the album over 10 times, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm bouncing back and forth between a 3.75 and a 4, but I think I'm gonna stick with a 4. So
solid.
That's me on that. And go listen to his other stuff, because it is drastically different, and you'll probably raise an eyebrow to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is you even made some great points there, especially just how he sort of combines that lush, beautiful sounds with the sort of unnerving. I think that is also a great point, which probably contributes to why I like this. Because the thing is, it's so easy for work like this to fall flat. It really, really is. You take those bass components, and if you're just too comfortable with them, if you think that they stand on their own without actually doing something with them over the course of time, they can grow really, really static. Mm-hmm. And I still would argue that maybe he's like right on the brink with that. He could do more. He could go further with a lot of this. But he's in a really, really good place. He's not really failing to me in any moment. No. That's the way I see this, at least.
Yeah, even the bad stuff is still not a failing. I mean, on an overall wrap-up, I would say this is worth listening to no matter where your tastes lie in music. On the simplified scale of burn it, listen to it, buy it, listen to it. Definitely don't miss this record.
It's interesting at the very least.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very
absolutely.
intriguing. Especially for someone who's never heard any work like this.
You would definitely
we're
be
all coming
intrigued.
in with some background with this type of stuff. But yeah, it could blow someone's mind
quite
who
easily.
Had never heard this the first time.
Well, and let me just add one more thing. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
So was it you, John, that mentioned like other types of there's hints of like stuff that you've heard, like dance music, other types of techno, but it's
presented in a much different way than what you would actually come to expect electronica to be.
I think
because there is a lot of that here. There is a lot of jungle, and there is a lot of drum and bass, and even
there's
hip hop.
Hell of a lot of house
He's
music.
straddling a line between a lot of this where he comes off as very original. He comes off as sort of separate from the pack. Again, the pack is just so jumbled. It's a mess of people who a lot of times sound exactly like one another, and he's standing out. That's worth my points for putting him over a 4.
And that's the main reason, is because he doesn't do the verse chorus that you get in so much electronica. So a lot of that is actually tailored towards a verse chorus idea.
Oh yeah,
which is something he doesn't delve into. This is natural prog stylized as opposed to
I would agree with that.
Pop stylized of electronica, which is, I think, what really sets this kind of music apart.
Even in that regard, he stays away from falling into either category. It's not so structured. Begin part A and part B begins. Outro, intro, and whatnot.
It becomes
but at the same time,
it's
not 100% sound bites. It's not just the same from moment 1 to moment A to Z. I mean,
it's the closest we've gotten, at least in stuff we've reviewed, to an even balance of that stuff.
Yeah,
I think.
And it's mostly how he introduces everything. He's a master at showing you this is what you're going to hear next, and you're going to like it.
I could have used a little bit more aha moments, and that would have really pushed it to the.
I think so too. Yeah, there were no real aha moments.
Like aha.
Yeah,
but
I will add one more thing. Now that we're off the review, technically, I didn't say it during, but I'm going to say it now. John, this is everything the deep chord could have been. Could have been, had it actually gotten off that other thing, being a soundbite front to back. It's more
if
introspective.
If it stopped being minimalistic, deep chord could have done this.
Yeah, well,
But sometimes I like minimalism.
Was Deep Chord one of the ones that you guys liked initially, and then the more you listened to it?
No. It's one. They hated it.
Me and Matt hated it front to back.
I lowered it because I know I was more
Episode 70.
emotionally...
Refer episode 70. Everyone check out Deep Chord.
I was over 3. They were both 2 or
70.
less.
But just the thing, you said that that it moved you in a certain way, just the chords wise. But that's the thing. To me, this is more introspective, more moody, and more variety without sacrificing form or modesty. And that's the sort of quintessential ambient chill wave that I think really gets me. It's kind of a mutedness.
I think I mostly agree with Steve. But I don't know that I would go as far as to say this is what some other band could have been, because it's not them, it's this band. So it's almost apples and oranges, because Deep Chord might have been going for that minimalistic sound. So
True.
Saying what it could have been,
it's a shining example of how to make mood music more engaging.
Yes, I'll agree with that. But wow, I didn't expect by listening to this album that we'd go almost 2 hours on talking about this album. That said,
Well, it's magic.
Yeah.
He's got some magic.
On that note, everyone, go and listen to Prefuse 73 and the Thievery Corporation. That will complement this
and
well.
Also, after this podcast, go listen to Hops.
Oh.
So our guest today, who's been chatting with us about the record, is Hops, the hip-hop rap type.
And now we will talk to him.
Who I, again, met at a Shave of the Dark Lord show, his album release show, and was blown away by his energy on stage, his ability to rhyme, and the beats that he rhymed over.
Thank you.
And so it's a pleasure to have you. So, the first thing I want to ask is honestly, how did you know you wanted to pursue hip-hop in any way, shape, or form?
It's a weird story. I was in 6th grade, and I was at a school that, I guess you could classify it as an inner-city school. It was very urban. There was a lot of hip-hop culture was big. And most of the kids were doing it, and I wanted to fit in, so I sort of hopped on without even really caring about it. It was just a way for me to sort of figure out who I was going to be and how I was going to have a good time at this school. And then I realized that I was terrible at it, and I didn't like that, so I just sort of made sure that I wasn't terrible. So I was just stubborn. I was just I'm bad at this. I can't be bad at this. So I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. And I was listening to more hip hop back then than I am now. I was listening to Ice Cube, KRS-One.
For all of those folks who are younger, Ice Cube wasn't always an actor. He actually made music at one point. Yeah, some quite good music.
That's right.
Instead of making terrible family comedies.
Yeah. So yeah, Ice Cube, KRS-One, MC Shan, the Beastie Boys, of course, are huge influence. And Insane Clown Posse. I was a big, because of their creativity and their energy and the picture that they painted for their fans.
Usually on their face.
Usually on their face. Hey. No, they were very engaging,
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
they were showmen beyond anything else.
Exactly.
So they're very hilarious in interviews. You ever heard their interviews? It's quite a ride.
Because they don't care what anybody thinks about them.
That's
so they say whatever they want. And
you should see their movie. Their Western.
Big Money Hustlers. Oh, Big Money Rustlers.
Yeah.
That's the sequel to Big Money Hustlers.
It was...
Rustlers?
My eyes were bleeding at the end of it. It was terrible.
Yeah.
I just want to... You mentioned that you were very stubborn about going through and sort of honing the hip-hop talent. And that's probably the most respectable answer to an interview question of that nature than I've ever heard. Because normally the answer is always something like, well, I just found it was my thing. I just found it was, my niche that I went into.
Wasn't my thing at all.
That's the answer you always hear, though, whenever you ask people. It's just like, well, I just fell right into it, and you worked at it, and that's really appreciated.
Talent.
Well, and then, I got to the point where I was good at it, but I was interested in other types of music. So it was this weird thing where it's like, okay, well, I love rapping and I love rhymes and I love the process of writing, but I don't necessarily want to do what Eminem does or do, so I don't know. It's very strange. Like I haven't bought a hip hop record, in like over 10 years, probably. Because I can't stand it. Like, most of it really annoys me. People are like, yo, man, you got to check out Action Bronson. You got to check out Drake. You got to check out all these. And I do, and there's like nothing there for me.
And I mean, I agree with that a lot as far as hip-hop goes. I mean, like I've said before, to no surprise to anyone who listens to this podcast, I'm into nerdcore and kind of things on the peripheral of hip-hop more than hip-hop lately. I mean... stuff like that Schaefer and MC Frontalot and even Macklemore and Ryan Lewis do is I feel like a return to what hip hop really should be in the direction it should go than what some of the other mainstream finger quote artists have been doing.
Yeah.
A lot of it is boring and repetitive.
Well, here's the thing about hip hop is the point is to speak your mind. There's no rules about what is supposed to be on your mind, what you're supposed to spit.
That's kind of the rub, isn't it? There's no rules, so inevitably you can't really, change the whole way things are going. A lot of times you just kind of have to accept it because that's the underwritten rule.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going to say, and we have listened to your album, I think you're going back to the old school roots, and that is the more personalized type of hip-hop, which is actually what's on the peripheral and starting to become a little more mainstream. Hip-hop started talking about what was going on in wherever you were, and because it was such an inner-city idea, it had that kind of inner-city presentation.
Right.
It had that kind of dejected kind of a feel in a lot of ways, but it also contained some heavy elements of hope and of making it big and getting out of there. And that aspect, that making it big, overshadowed so much of hip-hop. And has become what we consider mainstream, what becomes the mainstream rap.
Well, it was a really elaborate celebration, is what that was, because the music was really starting to get recognized. Rap artists were making a ton of money, and it was that whole idea, from the ghetto to the mansion, and that was something to be proud of, and that is something to be proud of. But it just like completely overtook the popular rap industry.
That's the thing. I mean, when you hear that revelation, it's very. It has a lot of impact. For instance, like in 1986, like okay, that is new. This is a genre that no one ever really thought would take off. They thought it was kind of going to be a fad. A lot of people thought it was going to be a fad, and yet it did take off. So sure, revel in it for a while. After 20-something years, it's kind of almost not worth reveling, because after 20 years, it's clear it made it. It has that power. It will probably always have that power. Does that always have to be the subject matter?
Right.
Which is actually why I really enjoyed your album with Jack F. Jenny.
Jack Fuck Jenny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Clockwork, with So Good, some of the songs that I really, really did enjoy. It was grittier. It just came off realistic as opposed to bright lights and gold plating. It definitely has a more humanizing element that you find in the early hip hop, and I got to commend you for that. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and it's funny, speaking to why these three hosts are a perfect combination, because we do look at things so differently. The songs that I attached to off the record were the catchier songs, but that spoke more to his personal. I feel Hops' more personal taste in music than his life events. Like, I mean, I've already said ad nauseum that Brain Shake is one of my favorite songs on the record, and for me it's because it's got the hook of one of my favorite U2 songs, She Moves in Mysterious Ways, and that obviously you've said you're a fan of U2, you've enjoyed their music, so it speaks to your taste, which you totally get a sense of with the way you mix that track, the way it sounds, Yeah.
And just leading in, who else do you like?
Who else do I like?
Well,
besides U2 and ICP, which is a beautiful combination.
Oh man, the big ones. Let's see, 9 Inch Nails.
Okay.
New Order.
Oh wow, New Order.
Nice. Massive Attack. Moby is a big one for me.
I really like Moby.
Sure.
Names I haven't heard.
Actually, So Good is a Moby sample from his punk rock album that he put out in '94.
Oh wow!
Oh man, I skipped that.
No,
one.
90. It's either '94 or '97. I can't remember. It's called Animal Rights, and it's his least successful album.
Which is probably why I haven't heard of it, because I didn't have money to buy
You should check it out.
Then.
It's great. It's great. It's some of it's industrial, most of it's punk rock, but then there's there's an 11-minute song called Alone, and it's just this deep percussive these deep percussive drums in the background with these soft strings, and it just builds and builds and builds. That's a good album. Check out that album. So, and who else?
Well, what genres do you listen to, just in general?
I listen to a lot of electronic-based music.
Oh, really?
A lot of electronic-based music.
I know we were talking off air about Daft Punk and everything that's going on with them.
Yeah.
I gotta ask, what do you think of the whole dubstep movement?
When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it's just annoying.
That's pretty much what we've all said. We've had moments where oh, this is doing something interesting and new. Oh my god, this is god awful.
Yeah.
It's very much an extreme genre.
It's still more on the edge of that, where it's I'm hard pressed to hear the stuff that really works. You're gonna have to throw that by me, because I've been disappointed more than I have.
As cliche as it sounds, Skrillex, the guy knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
and he's just become a joke, which is really a shame, because he really is good.
Yeah, he really is good. His first couple albums are incredible, and but what he does is it's not all about that modulated bass. That is what dubstep is. He puts a lot of harmony in his songs. He puts a lot of samples and piano and all type. I mean, there's a lot going on in those songs. A lot of them are pretty. Really, even with the hard-hitting dubstep bass that we've all come to know and love.
Or at least know.
Yeah, at least know.
In some cases.
Right. Then there are other guys who they just... their entire show is dependent on that sound.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can enjoy it is if you've had massive amounts of alcohol and you're on massive amounts of drugs. And the only thing that really matters to you is the way that the bass is making you feel.
Yeah.
It's stand as close as possible to the speaker.
It's ecstasy.
Yeah.
Essentially.
There you go.
Right.
Of course, I had mentioned this briefly off air, so I'm going to ask on air. You mentioned before about how you kind of just hopped onto the hip-hop train. That brings me to your hip-hop name, Hops.
Yeah.
Where does that stem from? Is it because of that, or is it from somewhere else?
Well, when I first started rapping, I had a really terrible name. It was Digifunk.
That's why you reference it in the album.
That's correct.
Okay, I was wondering.
And actually, I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble by saying this. When I put that album out, my name was Digifunk, but I've recently changed it to Hops. The album is quite old. I won't say how old, but regardless, it's a stupid name, and I was trying to think of something short and sweet, and my roommate at the time, Dan, was taking a leak in a bathroom, and somebody had written Hops on the wall, and he said, "What about hops?" And I said, "You know what, I like it."
There you go.
So that's it. It was on the
bar
wall
bathroom
at
wall.
a pisser.
But
it just works.
Well, it is. It's short and sweet.
Short and sweet, yeah.
Easy to remember.
Right.
So, we talked about your album a bit. You do have a new track also, which we've all heard, where you team up with the aforementioned Shape of the Dark Lord, called Men Bionic.
Mm-hmm.
That really gives a sense of how you have interests outside of just music. You both make a lot of nerdy robot references in that song from pretty much start to finish. Obviously you're into hip-hop since you sing it.
Right.
But what are your other interests outside of music? Because music is a big part of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you must have other things that really drive you.
He loves asking this question. Really, just let him have it.
Film. I went to school for film.
Ooh, that is a good one, actually.
So I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in film. I am currently an editor at a production company in Manhattan, and I enjoy that job. And I really want to combine the music with the film in some way. It's weird because sometimes I focus more... the last 5 years I've been focusing more on, myself as an editor than I have as a musician. It's only recently that I've started getting back into music. And, that song with Schaefer was, it's going to be on a short collection of songs that I'm going to release in the near future. But a lot of it was just an excuse for me to do something and get something out. And him and I had been talking about collaborating for a while. And so we finally did that. And, I don't want to say it was an excuse to make something because that's sort of, it sounds like I'm belittling the song. But I had to make something. I had the energy and I was like, all right, let's do something.
I'd argue some of the best work can come out of that drive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I was comfortable doing it. It wasn't like I was forcing it out.
Sure.
Like I actually wanted to make it happen.
Well, I will say that, the combination of the visual and auditory arts, we talked about it at length with individuals like Steam Power Giraffe.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the Gorillas, which we love talking about them, bringing them up once in a while. It's definitely a very viable medium. Yeah. Even though MTV doesn't do music videos anymore.
Well, look at Beyonce, what she just did.
Exactly.
That's
the most recent one, and we reviewed that. We reviewed her.
Yeah,
and
my girl.
That album actually had some surprisingly strong imagery. So obviously you're working on a new EP. Are you planning on doing some more shows? Do you have a tour in the works?
Oh boy, I wish I could tour.
But 9 to 5 does cut down on that.
It really does. Having a normal person job is, you can't really... And, there's only 2 people at the company. So, like, if one half of the company leaves, it's kind of... It's tough. But, yeah, I got some songs in the works. I'm taking a break from doing shows right now so I can get these songs together. And hopefully the next time I perform, I will have 4 lovely new songs to show the world. Although I've been performing one of them pretty frequently, but yeah, so we'll see. I'm excited about what's supposed to come out, and we'll see what happens.
Well, we're definitely excited to hear more stuff from you in the future. Any words of wisdom you want to share with the audience? Things that kind of get you through the hard stuff, the tough stuff?
Be patient with yourself, because when I first got here, I thought that I had to immediately get into music, immediately get into film, and that is extremely stressful. It's you do have to work at it, but make sure that you're on your own pace. Because, like, I recently, well, not recently, but a couple years ago, I bought my own equipment so that I could record at my leisure. And so whenever I feel inspired, I go and I write and then I record, and that's it. I mean, I'll write songs and record songs, months apart. But that's what I'm most comfortable with. So I don't know if this is really advice, actually.
That's actually great advice.
Yeah,
I'm relating this to, my own... That's perfect.
Well, I mean, just don't, you don't have to cave under the pressure of making it in New York City. I mean, enjoy the city, enjoy your youth, if you're still young.
Well, you're also being exposed to so much city
youth is in the mind anyway.
Youth is in the mind.
Yeah. You're being exposed to everything in this city. Exactly. Might as well take it in and use it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're inspired,
perfect.
Do what you got to do. I don't feel guilty about not making music because I've decided to just do it when I feel comfortable to do it. And I think that's really therapeutic for an artist. So yeah.
And before we start wrapping up, I would like to feature one of your songs at the end of the podcast. Do you have a favorite, a pick that you would like us to tack on for the audience at the end?
Oh my goodness.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Clockwork?
Yeah, sure. You can do Clockwork. Clockwork's a ditty. I will say that featured on Clockwork is Tony Bananas.
Tony Bananas.
A.K.A. Michael Marlar, who is actually a stand-up comedian now. He's doing his thing. Yeah, it's a good song. Sure.
All right, so we're going to have Steve tack that on at the end. Before we tackle wrapping up, as always, Steve has a wonderful spam mail for us. What have you got this week, Steve? Oh my God, it's a block of text.
I've been surfing, browsing online more than 3 to 4 hours a day, yet I never found any interesting article like yours. It is pretty worth enough for me. In my opinion, personally, in my view, it is all webmasters, site owners, website owners, web owners, and blogs make good GoopPod content as you did. The internet web will be much more like a useful than ever before. I could not refrain from commenting. Very well, perfectly well, exceptionally well written. I will, right away, immediately take hold, grab of, clutch, grasp, seize, snatch your RSS feed. As I can't, in find your email subscription, link, hyperlink, or newsletter, e-newsletter service. Do you have any? Please kindly allow, permit, let me realize, recognize, understand, recognize, know, so that in order that I may, could subscribe. Thanks. It's appropriate, first, best, perfect, the best. Time to make plans for the future. It is time to be happy. I've read this post, and I couldn't want to, wish to, desire to, suggest to, fuse some interesting things, or advice, suggestions, tips.
Was that spam, or was that beat poetry?
It is by Beats by Dre Studio was the sender.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I find it to be quite unusual, disconcerting.
Almost.
Yes,
Kind of, sort of, almost.
With all the and including the weirdness.
It should also be noted that was commenting on the gallery photo.
That's how we always know.
Amazing.
Because the ones that sound the most realistic, not this one, but others are always comments on a photo or something else.
I love that picture
just an
of
album
that
cover
teeth that we
Before
used
we
for that thing.
Wow.
Before we close up, I also want to say, Hops is our January guest. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. It was great to be here.
I am going to announce, we don't have a specific date yet, but our next guest will be one of the Wasties. Another solo Wastie will be joining us in the month of February, Sarah Bisman. She's going to play some guitar for us, talk about with us her time on Law & Order. She recently filmed on that. John is going to tell us what he's picking for next week.
Next week, we are going back to a previous artist that we had, though it's a completely different field. Serge Tankian's Symphony from last year, Orca. And it's quite unusual. I've heard snippets of it, but it should be fun. If nothing else, it should just be fun. It is Serge Tankian.
The title name on the album is Das Karussell, and it's called Orca Symphony No. 1. It's 4 tracks. I use the word track loosely.
It's 4 pieces.
Yeah. And
Movements.
So that's what we'll be getting into next week. And of course, I'd like to have our guest read our sign-off, if you would, so kindly, and close us out for this episode of Crash Chords.
Let me tell you something. Music is life, and life is good.
Tick tock, tick tock, tick 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 tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. I do jumping jacks from track to track and blaze raps with my metaphorical syntax. More ready than the press for a national attack. In fact, you better call 911. I'm behind one gun and I'm packing another one. Cocked and ready with the rhymes and rock steady so heavy they break Sevsky out of prison. Colors attract to create the prism. A living, breathing, rapping organism. My ventriloquism, me is realism. I got mad success, that's a given. I'm living large. Don't ask jeans and broke cars. Selling you shit at your local bazaar. Yo, we work the clock and we rock the mic well. Delivering your daily news like Steve Carell. Hell can wait, I'm in a state of mind. We got plenty of time, so give the clock a wind. Tick, 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 tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, 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 tock. Shock therapy, rock cleverly. Tony B, still top the hip-hop bakery. No cereally pastries, y'all can't mirror me or match me. Like pinstripes and paisley, your third eye's lazy. You got an appetite for mics and destruction. Got a poison muffin for your buttons. So your pants poppin' buttons, so your pants ain't shutting. Dead man, Dan, don't dance, don't say nothing. Your cats ain't going national. Damn style's way too vaginal. I'm rough sex, but you casual. That's why taking me out ain't even actual. You can't stop my flow, the block will know. You best just flop and go. I'm off the flow. Tony Bananas and Tony Soprano. And to also make the crowd go. Whoa, 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 whoa. We do it like clockwork, whack MC 6 feet under the block dirt. See me at the rock concert with a Downfall 2012 t-shirt. We squirt bomb-ass raps from water pistols, melodic missiles, launched from Maidstown to Bristol. I got a fist full of cash, a bag of the hash, and a rascal ripping the mic. I just might let loose and start a fight. Do what's right, like rapping, I'm out of sight. My insight is incredible, it's inevitable that I'm letting them know what the motherfucking deal is. The realest rhymes that make it feel so fine. Listening to this is like a wine and dine. I'm finding mine, it's my time to shine. I may not be baking and making cheese, but you can goddamn well put your steaks on these. But you can goddamn well put your steaks on these.